Okay, everyone, I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the salute to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of
United States of
America,
America. And
To the republic
which it
which
stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
You gotta work on that, guys.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think we'll be judged too harshly for not being perfect at that. Welcome, everyone, to the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation for November 2020. We're still operating under the directive from the governor, which allows us to hold these meetings in what we call the webinar format under Zoom. All 12 members are here. On the screen, I have our controller, budget director. Catherine's here for doing our minutes. So we'll be doing the meeting under that format. With that, I would like to bring us to item number 2 on our agenda, which is the routine applications. And I would call on the clerk of the board, Mr. Drake.
I'll read two routine applications. The first one is HD2 from the Health Department, $43,311, which is approval to use a grant. And the second one is HD3, also in the Health Department, $115,597, which is also approval to use a grant.
Okay. Those items are before us that have been moved.
And I'll second that.
Seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Discussion? All those in favor?
There's a hand up, Mike.
Sorry,
Mary-
Chair. I just wanted to note that I think we dropped Pete Minarski. He's in the waiting room.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you very, very much.
And I'm not sure we're recording, Mike.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Maybe we should recall that vote.
I will. I promise I will do that. Let's see here. I don't have my record button. Why do I not have my record button?
I can do it, Mike.
I have it. I got it.
We're recording now.
Thank you very, very much. That's only about the 10th time in a row that I've forgot to hit that button and been reminded. So I'm going to back up the meeting for a second for the sake of the minutes. Before us are 2 requests on our routine applications. HD2 for the Health Department for various grants to use the PHEP grant for $43,311, and item HD3 from the Health Department to approve to use the ELC COVID-19 grant for $115,597. The items have been moved and seconded. Normally we do roll call votes, but unless somebody has objection, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? And if you raise your hand at any time, if you're opposed or abstaining or something you want change, I'll recognize that. So I will show that as 12-0 on my record, which brings us to our non-routine applications. PW2, Ms. Tarkington on behalf of the Budget Committee.
Yes, PW2 was a Public Works application for $2,500,000 for an additional appropriation on the South Stanwich Road causeway. And so I so moved that.
And I'll second.
Mike, you're on mute.
Committee report, Mike?
I'm sorry. Yes, committee reports before discussion, please.
Deputy Public Works Commissioner Jim Michael explained that due to the collapse of a 55-foot portion of the south side of South Stanwich closed, the rerouting of all vehicles, including fire, police, and GEMS, increases the destination arrival time by approximately 5 minutes. Since the causeway divides the Aquarian Water Company's Rockwood Lake Reservoir, land records have been researched to identify ownership of the road as the town's, not Aquarian. The Budget Committee was advised that the expanse of the 500-foot causeway does not qualify as a bridge. Mr. Michael proposed using the design-build process to expedite the emergency repair to both sides of the road due to favorable factors such as the current drought water level and availability of aesthetically appropriate stone materials currently being removed from a nearby Aquarian reservoir. Aquarian is using a town-approved on-call contractor for that project. That contractor could be used for the town's approximately 425 feet long, dry, laid stone wall repair, with completion estimated at the end of March. Aquarian's collaboration with the town is expected to continue, with Aquarian's objective to refill the reservoir beginning in April. Various sources for funding the application were considered for this interim appropriation. And I'll just add here, because we have another request, that the committee is recommending bonding. So upon a motion by Ms. Moriarty, seconded by Mr. Raymer, the committee voted 4-0-0 to approve the request for $2.5 million, accompanied by a bonding resolution, and recommend the application to the full BET as non-routine application. Again, it was unanimously approved.
Thank you. Before I go, just so that people who are watching, the reason there's a separate item under FI-2 for the bonding resolution is, as you know, our requirements to approve, to authorize or to recommend borrowings to the RTM has a different vote limitation than a regular item on our agenda. So in discussions building up the agenda, we just put FI-2 on there as the separate for that reason. But thank you. Discussion on the item. Just raise your hands and we'll go right down and call you off. Discussion on this item? Ms. Crumick.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Why at this point, since it's a single lane, why aren't we trying to make it 2-lane? It just seems strange that we're going back into what seems to be a historic decision somewhere along the line to make a very, very narrow road there.
Anybody want to answer that?
Mr. Mason,
Yes,
that
please.
was not addressed at the meeting. I believe it would, they were looking at this as a repair, and that would be a complex new project, which would delay, much delay the reopening of this road, which is a critical east-west safety for emergency vehicles for that part of town.
Am I, Mr. Mason?
Please.
Am I correct that the decision was made, though, that instead of just doing a small repair, there was a decision to make a full repair of that whole strip? Or am I confused?
If I can answer that, in the budget, that was discussed as well. And the engineer evaluating the bridge, which they estimate to be maybe 100 years old, believes that the other portions of the external rock may also be subject to failure. And so not addressing it at this point would leave the potential for a problem in the near term.
It might be worth mentioning that the collapsed portion, the written materials say are about 55 feet of it. How much is the collapse? Whereas the total section, the total bucket thing they intend to do is over a distance of 425 feet. So the proposed work is for quite a bit more than just the 55-foot portion that collapsed.
The 400 plus feet extends on both sides of the bridge, whereas the 55, I think, is just the one side.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Deuce has his hand up.
To respond to Beth's question about why not expand the width of the road, I don't know the answer, but I could guess the size, given the size of the project, and we're talking about 2 retaining walls, one on the south side, one on the north side of the causeway, will require a lot of rock, approximately 15,000 tons. If you're going to add another lane, who knows how many more thousands of tons that would require. It's already a fairly massive project, and I just have to believe expense would have been suggested not expanding the width of the road, particularly given the use primarily as a means for emergency vehicles to cross over from one side to the other.
Isn't it for the neighbors as well?
Yeah, yes.
In that area?
It's open to the public. It has a weight limit posted, but it's open for smaller cars, less than 4 tons.
Further discussion? I shared the screen of the damaged area, and I think Mr. Raymer said something about 55 feet long. That looks pretty close. Further discussion? Seeing no discussion, Mr. Drake.
Let's proceed to a vote on PW2. We'll come back to FI2 in a minute, but PW2, a vote yes is a vote in favor. Ms. Cruiser,
Yes.
Ms. Hess,
Yes.
Ms. Kremick,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington,
Yes.
Mr. Mason.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Basiliotis,
Yes.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Erickson.
Yes.
That was unanimous.
Okay, that moves us on to FI2, Fox India -2, Ms. Tarkington?
Yes. FI2, I move FI2, which is a bonding resolution authorizing $2,500,000 of borrowings to finance the South Sandwich Road Causeway.
The item is moved. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Raymer. Discussion on the item? Just raise your hands and I'll call on you.
Do you want me to just give a little?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please. Committee report, please.
Various sources for funding the $2,500,000 application for South Sandwich Road were considered for this interim appropriation, including bonding and use of unrestricted fund balance or the capital non-recurring fund. After considering the estimated lifespan of the repair of 50 to 75 years or more and continued unknowns, including the impact of COVID-19, the committee is recommending bonding, and hence this bond resolution.
Okay. On behalf of the Budget Committee, the item is moved. Do I have a second?
It was seconded.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Raymer. Discussion. Hands up.
Physical hand.
No, the hands up on the right hand side.
Okay, I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Ms. Hess?
A little slow to it tonight, sorry. So my question is, I get that we borrow for capital projects, but we're so close to doing a bigger bonding in January, and I kind of view doing, and I know it's been done before where we do, one-off financings over, it wouldn't be unusual to do that, but this doesn't seem like that large a dollar amount. We do have the amount. Seems to me, isn't it better to just not go through the financing now? It does increase interest, although it's at a very low rate right now, but rather just kind of keep with our normal process, borrow in January, and not do this project. I would be open if this was a much larger dollar amount. I would be open, but it seems on the smaller side. And is it worth doing a one-off financing? I'm thinking not. That's just sort of how I was thinking about it.
I've done my both.
Michael, you're on mute. Michael, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Mr. Deuce, followed by Ms. Tarkington and Ms. Moriarty.
I've been giving this a lot of thought since the Budget Committee meeting, and I think the arguments put forward by Leslie have some merit. Basically, she's arguing financial flexibility in uncertain times. Counter arguments have been we should need to follow the right process. And the threshold for approval here is a little bit different. So having thought about it, I think I'll probably recommend not bonding this at this juncture. I don't think it's sufficiently large to require that for purposes of flexibility.
Thank you, Mr. Deuce. Ms. Tarkington, followed by Ms. Moriarty.
So I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Mason, because Mrs. Hess' question, she may not understand, the process may not be clear. So for the public, what this would be accompanied by a bonding resolution. We would the town would continue to use the same process as it has before. It only bonds when expenditures are either expected or spent. So there would be no individual issuance of bonds, and this would not cost any additional process or rating agency time or anything else. Rather, it would be blended into the issuance of bonds that would occur in January of 2021 and in January of 2022. And so therefore, it's not a separate issuance. However, if we don't decide to support a bonding resolution with this accompanying this appropriation, we will not be able to bond for this project. And that is the reason why the Budget Committee supported unanimously the funding of this with a bond resolution, rather than using, say, the one of the other forms of fund balances that we have. Capital non-recurring obviously being the most logical for this particular item.
Thank you, Ms. Moriarty.
Yes, I just wanted to add, I support the bonding resolution for this project. When I think about the time of the year when the BET really analyzes our fund balances and our tax policy, it is during our budget process in February and March. And if we make the decision now to use these funds out of capital non-recurring, it certainly limits one of the funding sources that have been identified in the budget guidelines. It puts that into question as we discuss what that fund for capital non-recurring needs to be. And I don't think we have enough information to change our course at this point. I want to reinforce the comment that Ms. Harkington just made, that approving this bonding authorization needs to be coupled with the approval and appropriation for the project to give us a flexibility to bond the project. We can't go back later and decide we want to bond this project. And as Mr. Minarski explained to us at the Budget Committee, and he may want to add a few comments here, this project would be handled when the town does its annual bonding in the market, so that it's not an incremental approach. We're not going out for the cash immediately. We will manage our cash needs for the project to get it started right away, which is the reason we're dealing with it as an interim, but yet we can deal with the financing in the normal course. So I strongly support that we vote in favor of the bonding authorization.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson?
Actually, my question for you, Mr. Chair, is to Mr. Minarski, just to ask him if the dollar amount is a limitation, or if he has any thoughts on whether we bond or use the capital non-recurring fund for this.
You've already approved the appropriation. You now need a funding source. You've got two options. You've got the capital non-recurring. If the bonding resolution fails and you don't go forward, the money would come out of the capital non-recurring. If you look at the treasurer's report, you've got $2.9 million in it now. And if you look at the budget guidelines and the preliminary mill rate, it has a funding source of $3 million to balance the budget from capital non-recurring for $3 million. That brings you down to 6.2. The project's 2.5 million, but it's got a very large contingency. Chances are you're not going to spend, well, I don't want to say that because you don't know what's going to happen once you get into this project over the water. But let's say you spend the whole two, your capital non-recurring is at 3.7, you end the year around $4 million. Option number one is, are you comfortable with $4 million in the capital non-recurring? I've heard feedback that let's say potentially there's a worst case where you need to tap this fund for more than $4 million. If you had wiped this fund out, you could always replenish it in the future. But don't forget, if this fund was ever exceeded as far as monies needed beyond the 3.7, you default to the general fund. Now, That's one option. Option number two is you make the assumption that it's going to be bonded. The RTM has to approve it in December. Otherwise, it misses the January financing. And you basically would have to borrow against the other projects for a year and go to market in January of 22. The difference is that with the capital non-recurring, you're losing the interest income from investing the 2.5 as opposed to borrowing. And then you've got the ban cost of very minimal, less than 1%, maybe 80 basis points. And the only risk out there with the financing is that 3 years from now, you've took the gamble that you're going to have very low interest rates, and the opposite occurs, and the interest rates are very high in 3 years. We don't know what's going to happen a year from now, let alone 3 years. So I don't have a strong feel one way or the other. They're both good options. I would probably lean slightly towards bonding it.
So Pete, just to follow up, so the $2.5 million figure, somebody said maybe that was too small to bond. Is it? We don't have any threshold for bonding, right? I mean.
No, actually, it's the opposite is true. Roland is the maestro as far as picking which ones are the bonded ones and which ones are the cash ones. If this was in the normal process, this would have been a bonded project and no one would have gave it a second thought. It's actually the opposite. We don't like to bond small projects for like 50,000, 100,000. So it's actually the opposite argument.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. Hess has her hand up.
Yeah, so thanks, Laura, for clarifying the point about dollar amount. So I wasn't saying that maybe this was a threshold in terms of we wouldn't bond for it. I know we're saying it's part of the process, but I think of bonding as being annual, and I know this gives us that option. I think we talk about uncertain times. I think borrowing less is better than borrowing more. So if this was, in my mind, when I think about it, if it was a larger dollar amount, it seems more clear to me. This amount seems on the edge in terms of where we are in terms of our fund balance and cash and capital non-recurring. So it's not maybe so much what the policy might be from a material amount, but from me to add more borrowing for amount that seems on the smaller side for a one emergency project. So anyway, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Deuce?
If I can ask my colleagues, if we seek to bond this, it goes to the RTM in December, and that requires not just a majority approval, but some sort of supermajority approval.
Requires a majority of the full membership, 216 votes.
I'm sorry.
116.
116.
Oh, sorry, 116. Pardon. Yeah. Sorry.
I believe,
You had me leaving there, Jeff.
Sorry. That's quite a supermajority. Yeah.
Mr. Raymer, can I ask you to think about that answer? I believe they have to approve it by 2/3 of their membership, regardless of attendance.
No, I think they have to approve it by a majority of their full membership, regardless of attendance.
Regardless of their attendance. Okay, just so we know. So do I see any other hands up? Let me offer a few thoughts on this. So right now we're in the middle of reviewing our fund balance and debt policies, something we do on a biannual basis as for our policy manual. The BET has more choices on funding when we're in February, March. For instance, on this particular project, somebody said to me that we're bonding this project because it's a larger number. My response was, if it was 700,000, would we bond it? If it was 1.2 million or 1.8 million, whatever the numbers are. So let's focus on alternatives. The budget committee could recommend to the BET in the next budget to bond other projects. As you heard, we have a threshold we use. Roland, what was that term Peter gave Roland? That was pretty good. But we have a threshold there where we could change that and borrow on other projects at that time, which is in effect like what we're doing, what we want to do tonight. We can raise tax levy at that time. We can use unrestricted fund balance at that time. Or we can use and we could decide how we want to do capital non-recurring. Maybe we need to put more into capital non-recurring or blend, whatever it is. I just see the options at that point in time. I understand these borrowings will take place with the regular borrowings. I just believe that we do our annual planning once a year for this kind of item. And quite frankly, if we're going to start bonding interims, that begs the question of what fund balance levels do we want to have? I mean, we run a fund balance of somewhere right now between 5 and 10, and we're slightly over of our operating budget. And that includes capital non-recurring risk fund and the general fund. So here we are, it's catch 22. We're over our policy right now. We might not be over it with our future policy, depending on how our working group comes out and recommends to us. So it's catch 22. I mean, if we're going to do this, we're going to borrow on interims that we should have a policy on what level interim we're going to borrow on, especially if we're going to make that decision mid-year, or we stick to what we have now. We certainly know we have the cash to cover this in capital non-recurring or the general fund. So I'm in total in favor of the project. So there's no question, but I will not be supporting the bonding resolution at this time. Ms. Tarkington has her hand up.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask for you, Mr. Minarski or Mr. Geiger? I believe we have funded interim projects in the past. Is that correct? This is not necessarily, I mean, we talked about this a bit, in the budget committee, but this is correct that in the past we have funded other interim projects. We don't just fund, we've had, bonding resolutions with interims. Is that a better way of asking the question?
I'll go first and Roland second. 16 years, I think there was 2 occasions. One was the land acquisition for Pomerantz, where we had to close on the deal in May and we borrowed in May. I can't remember. I think it was 2007. And I think Roland, was Mesa also in it?
There was an $8.6 million interim for Mesa, which was bonded, and there was another $1 million one or $950, I can't remember which, for Nathaniel Witherell, also an interim.
So there's been 3 or 4 occasions. There was one in where we had emergency appropriation in August one year when the sewers broke. I think it was Shore Road. I'm not sure. But there's maybe 4 occasions in the last 15 years.
Was that the one at Boys Girls Club, the sewer trunk line, Pete?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Mm-hmm.
I think Roland, Pete, did you want Roland to make a comment?
He did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, Peter. My point to that is I'm not sure we had a fund balance or a debt policy 15 years ago. And I'm not sure even if we had what the criteria was then. And I could tell you that 15 or 16 years ago, and I'm looking at Ms. Tarkington and Mr. Raymer, we had a negative fund balance at that time. I don't know what our options were at that time off the top of my head at this point, but today is a different day. And we've done a lot of financial planning to get ourselves in this good position. I call it a good position. That's a credit to all of you. But just so we understand that, 15 years ago is a different time than now. And obviously we've done a lot of things to prepare for these kind of things. Ms. Moriarty?
I just wanted to add, typically while we approve interim appropriations during the year, we approve more operating appropriations than we do capital. I think there are a limited number of capital projects each year. Some of them are in special funds. We've had a few Nathaniel Witherell projects and they're handled separately. So the fact that there have been only a few appropriations or a few bonding authorizations, it's on a smaller number of projects as well. And I guess the way that I view this, if we bond this project now or approve the bonding now, it gives us more flexibility come February and March when we're looking at our options for the budget and how we want to handle. We can bond fewer projects at that point in time if we feel we want to use the capital non-recurring more. But by not bonding it now, I think it takes away some of our options come the budget season. Thank you.
I do not see any more hands up. Am I missing anything? Okay, Mr. Drake, can you do a roll call vote? And before everybody votes, to send this resolution, to the RTM, we must have 7 affirmative votes, and they must be 7 voting members voting in the affirmative to send this to the RTM.
Right.
Okay, this is FI2. Ms. Erickson,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
I'm going to say yes.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Ms. Vasiliotis,
I'm abstaining.
I'm a no. Mr. Mason,
No,
Ms. Tarkington,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Crumick,
Yes.
Ms. Hess,
No.
Ms. Cruiser.
Yes.
That is 8 in favor, 3 noes, and an abstention. So
Say that one more time,
831.
831, thank you. Okay, that brings us to our next topic.
So that item passes.
Mike, can I say one more thing?
Yes,
What you're doing is a bonding resolution gives you the authority to go out and borrow up to $2.5 million. You can borrow less than $2.5 million 2 ways: if you don't spend 2.5, or if you have another funding source. If you want to change your mind over February, March, or April, you can revert to the capital non-recurring. So you haven't shut out that deal of getting money from the capital non-recurring, or a variety of both. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. And if anybody else does not, just raise your hand. I think this is a very valid point. Here was my question on this project. The time you go to market with this, I'm not sure if this project's going to be done. I think this is a pretty important project. I think they're going to, as soon as the RTM approves it, they're going to get going on this right away. And obviously, yes, the follow-up on this is what the actual spend on this may be significantly lower than 2.5, as Jim Michael said to us. And yes, we can have that conversation later. But I have a feeling this project's going to be done long before we even do the borrowing. So we're still going to have to use cash flow to cover it either way. Does everybody understand that? Okay, just checking. Okay, item number 3, assessor's report. Ms. Vasiliotis, can you bring over? Good evening.
Good evening. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. I'd like to present the assessor's report for November 2020. So currently we are finalizing the real estate portion of the 2020 grand list. All the field work has been completed. And currently there are no longer any more appraisers out in the field. Due to the COVID-19 surges here, we just thought it was a good idea to bring everyone in. All the building permits have been completed for the 2020 grand list, but we've also stopped the inspections for the revaluation, and we will resume those in the spring. We currently have 1,265 dwellings left to measure and inspect that we should be able to do with no problem this spring. Okay. Personal property, we are currently reviewing the personal property declarations that have been submitted by businesses here in town. We've currently got roughly over 2,000 of them, and 716 this year have filed electronically. So we're getting more and more of them to do that electronically and not file paper. As to the litigation, 3 residential cases were settled on the 2018 grand list. 1 commercial appeal from the 2019 grand list was withdrawn. We did get an additional residential appeal added. So because the governor has extended the state of emergency, the original executive order never gave a deadline to filing tax appeals. So we got an additional residential appeal this month. So I guess not until the state of emergency is concluded would we then stop people would be then prohibited from filing more tax appeals. So we actually did get one additional residential appeal last month. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I wanted to ask one question. On your report, you reported there were 3 litigation cases settled.
Mhm.
Can you tell us, and if you don't have it today, you can follow up later, but what the aggregate impact is on the grand list from the settlement? How much it was either reduced or, I guess it doesn't increase under these settlements, but just what the net impact is after settlement for those cases. And then going forward, if you could add that sentence into your report, not to identify each individual settlement, but what the impact on the grand list would be, that would be helpful to me.
Okay, so actually I can tell you right now, on the 2018 grand list, there were the 3 residential parcels were valued at $6,298,000 in fair market value. So that's the total. But as far as the reduction is concerned, I'll have to get that to you as far as what you're looking for, the tax dollars, the credit that we're giving out, correct?
Zach, what's the effect of the reduction?
The
Yep.
impact, yes.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Further comments? Can I get a motion? We accept the assessor's report for November.
So-
2020?
So moved.
Second,
Moved by Mr. Raymond,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Are there any no's or abstentions? Can I put that as 12-0? Mr. Drake, I'm going to show that as 12-0.
Yep.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 4. Lauren, don't go anywhere. That brings us to item number 4, the controls report. Mr. Minarski?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, BET members. 2 quick updates and I'll open it up to questions. The annual audit is proceeding. We're scheduled for December 2nd with Mr. Drake's BET Audit Committee group. You'll have a presentation from RSM US LLP on the comprehensive annual financial report. And also we'll have an appearance from Tom Turney, Mr. Marino, Vincent Marino. He'll be in executive session going through his legal letter, a confidential document which has been circulated. The CAFR should be ready in draft form probably the end of this week. It'll be before Thanksgiving. So the audit committee and the BET members will get a chance to review the CAFR, and comments are welcome. It's in draft form. We always have edits before it gets to its final form. And on the second set of comments in the paragraph 2 in the first page is the annual financing. I was actually working on the official statement, which I'll probably have finished in draft form and send it to Mr. Lindsay, the financial advisor. It looks like, we're going to bond 30 million. That's the second piece of the 2-year bands. And right now, the general obligations 30 million. The bands looks like it's going to be about 50 or 55 millions. One of the things is we track the spending for Robinson and Cole. We've got to be in compliance for IRS regulations as far as spend downs over a 2-year period. One of the things I noticed is the spending is way down. It looks like it's linked somewhat to the COVID situation. And for example, the current roster of capital projects for the years 2020-2021, there's 23 projects that haven't spent $1, and it's really slowed up. Some of the bigger, more important ones are going along at a regular pace. But right now, we've got tentatively the credit review scheduled for December 17th. We traditionally open it up in town hall. We usually meet in the Mazza room A number of BET members have attended this meeting. This year's different. I was speaking to Mr. Lindsay a couple hours ago, and one of the questions that came up, which I'm meeting again with Mr. Lindsay, Bill Lindsay, tomorrow morning, is do we open this up to a WebEx or a Zoom meeting, and then is it subject to FOI, the FOIA Act? We're in the process of looking at that. And then if we decide to open it up to a Zoom meeting and 7 of you show up, does that mean that we would have to have posted? Now, I don't know the answers. This is brand new. This is coming up for the first time. So we'll keep you in the loop, you plural, the BET, and see what we have to do because of the convenience of Zoom. You don't have to necessarily, you can't come down to town hall. There's a potential that we'll have a quorum. And then that presents a problem is, do we have a public meeting? Then that presents a bigger problem because if any of you before have attended these credit reviews, we have the tendency to creep into certain situations that are somewhat confidential, whether it's contracts, et cetera, anything's in that area. So I'll keep you on the loop, but right now it looks like December 17th. I think that's a Thursday. I got the wrong date. It's December 19th. No, I'm sorry. It's December 17th, a Thursday, isn't that? We had the wrong date? Nope, that's correct. So that's where we are with the borrowing, and I'll open it up to any other questions or the previous discussions.
Raise your hands. I'm looking for blue hands. Mr. Weisbrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question for you, Pete. In light of your comment about the 23 projects that are slowing down their expenditure, is the debt number, the capital project number that we're seeing in the 15-year cash flow that Andy sent out, that Roland prepared, reflecting that?
That's a Roland question. I don't think so, because Roland, you there?
I think that's an Andy question. Andy put the capital numbers in.
We're punting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think, to be fair to Andy, I just told him about this. So I'm going to say the answer for Andy is he hasn't factored it in. And potentially this can reverse itself.
Okay, thanks. That's good enough for now. Thanks.
I have Ms. Moriarty followed by Ms. Crumick.
Sorry, yep, I had to get to the button. I just wanted to ask for the next controller's report, if it's possible, on this purchasing invoicing project, which we know has been impacted on its timeline because of COVID. If in the controller's report, maybe you can give us at a very high level the steps remaining in the project, and then an estimated timeline so we can better follow and understand the expectations.
I can definitely do that. And this is lacking a little bit as far as more information. Tyler Technologies had a major cybersecurity breach, which impacted this project. And it's actually slowed it up about a month or two. They're overly cautious because of the cybersecurity breach, but yes, I can do that. I didn't want to put that in the controller's report, but since you touched that area, and it's not confidential, they're a national firm. They are overly cautious and are moving at a slower pace because of their cybersecurity breach.
The obvious question is because they have the software. This is the company that does the software for Munis, our basic financial accounting system. Is there a tie-in that our systems were at risk because of what happened to them, or is this just an internal company issue?
No, there is not that I actually asked that question. I can't guarantee the no, but I've been told no.
Ms. Crumick?
Yeah, I have two questions for Mr. Minarski. first, going back to the FOIA issue on setting up the rating meeting, have you worked with Attorney Ahmad about that? Because she certainly is the one that we have gotten guidance from in the past. So I'm not sure if you had said that earlier.
The issue actually came up about 2 or 3 hours ago.
Okay.
When I was talking to Mr. Lindsay and a light bulb went off, and
yeah,
we do it over the phone, and there's minimal. We've never had a quorum with the BET, and it just the light bulb went off, and I said, "Well, what happens if we because it's Zoom? Do we have to? In 7 of you show up, we violated potentially FOIA because you've got a quorum." And the answer is no. I haven't asked Amina because it just came up 2 hours ago.
Okay, I would suggest that you do that. I have a second question, which is, do we have a list of those 23 projects that haven't been addressed? And if not, could we?
Yeah, that actually is Roland can send that out to. I could actually send it out. I'll send
it out tomorrow morning to everybody, the open capital projects.
Yeah, be helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Weisbrod, your hand was up, but it disappeared.
No, I answered my own question. As I reflected on it, I answered myself.
Okay. Can I ask law committee members to maybe just chime in with Pete tomorrow and get to Amina, get an answer on that? I think there might be a suggestion out there. Half of us could go to one and half the other or something, but I think we should get an answer on that. I don't know. I often question when we're just attending something. If 7 of us attended an RTM district meeting, do we have to post that? No, it's not our meeting. It's just we're observing. But I think we need to get an answer on it.
That was the nature of my question, is that if you put the people in the attendee list and not as a panelist, well, one can make that argument. Just to what you're saying, Mike. That was what.
Yeah, it's that like minds, David, like minds. But again, I think we should get an answer on this. I really, so we know, because we don't want an FOI issue. And this is very interesting times. I mean, I didn't go to it last year, but I've been to it in the past, and it's very interesting to go through. Controllers report. Back to where we were. Any further comments, questions on the controllers report? Can I get a motion to accept the controllers report?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Tarkington, seconded by
Me.
Okay, let me just get my agenda here. That takes us to treasurer's report.
All those in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All those in favor?
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That was unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. I'm glad you're there. Takes us to item number 5, treasurer's report. Can we get the treasurer's report moved?
So moved.
Treasurer's report moved by Mr. Raymer, seconded by
Second.
I'll second.
by Mr. Weisbrod. I have it on the screen here for you. Discussion. I don't know if the public ever gets to see those. Okay, can I get a motion? We accept the treasurer's report for the month of, what are actually the dates on this one? Peter, wasn't there a conversation you had with us about the dates on it this year? It's labeled the October report. Is that accurate, Peter Minarski?
This is the October report. The last month did not carry over the accurate date. It was the old date from August into September. In the September one never. It was just an error in the agenda, and I noted that at the meeting. So this is properly posted.
Okay, thank you very much.
All
Okay.
those in favor of the treasurer's report, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstention?
One abstention.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Crumick. Mr. Drake, you have that?
Yes.
1101.
1101.
Okay. Continuing on. I have nothing understanding committees. I just want you to, everybody to know, last month when we really gave an update on all our committees, I received a lot of feedback on that from people who watched the meeting. They thought that was beneficial, and I appreciate that. Liaison reports. I do not have Nathaniel Witherell board checked off. That is my error. Mr. Deuce and Ms. Krummick probably have a report. So if I could, Mr. Deuce.
Okay, I'll lead off. In case you weren't aware, there was a RFP filed, issued last month on October 29th by the Purchasing Department on behalf of the First Selectman's Office for Nathaniel Witherell. And the purpose was, and I'll read to you, to invite proposals from qualified firms or organizations to assume the management in conjunction with the purchase or lease of the assets of Nathaniel Witherell. The two deadlines are November 19th for receipt of questions and December 15th for receipt of proposals. And this has gone out to a large number of names. I don't have the final tally, and my understanding keeps increasing every day. But my guess is, my understanding is a little over 60 names have been directly contacted, and they've also received inquiries from those who have not been directly contacted, having heard about the RFP. It's available on the website in its entirety. There is going to be a small committee to evaluate the responses. I think there'll be at least 4 members on that committee will be from the BET. I believe it's Beth, Laura, Bill, and me. There'll be another 5 names to be added, which I'm not certain I know exactly who the whole 5 are. And it's also not clear if the committee's job will be done shortly after the 15th, or it will go in December, or will go on certainly into the winter months. Let me pause there. And Beth, I'm sure you may have a few comments you'd like to add on the RFP. Well, maybe not. I will say Larry Simon has been involved, and I asked Larry if the new management team at Nathaniel was disappointed to hear this. Well, I don't think they were thrilled, but they understand the process and continue to do their job very well, as we saw last month. And by the way, it continued again this past month in October. Let me pause there and see if there are other questions.
Yeah, Andy, let me.
Yes, Beth.
The one thing I would say is I was surprised that I learned about the RFP through a third party, and understanding that there were certainly members of the BET that were well aware this was about to happen. We know that Mr. Simon was involved. We know that the First Selectman and the town administrator were very much involved putting this together. It would have been helpful if there had been some sharing with those of us who have spent the last 4 years working on this. Be that as it may, I will agree to serve on the evaluation team to see what kind of proposals come forward. Having said that, and having just sat in on the board meeting of Nathaniel Witherell, I would hope that we would all take some time to see what's actually happening there right now, because it's very positive. And they're looking at other sources for services that they can provide. They're reaching out to the various hospitals and the places where they would receive residents or patients from. I was encouraged by the work that they have already done on reducing overtime, not just with nurses, but with maintenance, with all other areas. They are looking very carefully. I think we finally have a finance team and a senior management that understand the complexity of running a nursing home and the very issues that our consultants recommended that we focus on. So having said that, I hope that there will be at least some balancing as we look at these proposals of what we are really deciding to do with this particular facility in the town of Greenwich.
Thank you, Beth. I can't disagree with you on that. And I also agree that the new management team at Nathaniel is doing a very good job. I don't think we have time tonight for going over October financials, but I continue what we saw over the first 3 months of the fiscal year. Regarding the filing of the RFP, I was not aware of it until apparently 2 or 3 days after it was filed. And this is really primarily an initiative of the First Selectman's Office.
Before we get to comments, I'll have Mr. Weisbrod, then Mr. Raymer. I want to chime in on this. At the very beginning of the new Board of Selectmen, Ms. Moriarty and I met with the incoming team, and it was defined back then that this was going to happen. The COVID delays are what they are, and this was a little bit of a surprise when they fit it in. But I can also tell you that, more in my chairman's report, but last week we had we're trying to have our monthly meeting with town administrator and the first selectman, and Ms. Erickson. I'm looking for Ms. Erickson. We had a question on the representation on there. We know everything we do, we try to do balanced and equal. So Ms. Erickson, I'm hoping you'll join on with that group, and I will send Ben Branyan an email to include you. So I didn't want you to hear that from Andy. I know you had talked about it, but thanks for volunteering, even though you didn't put your hand up. But it's good to have that balance on our part. Mr. Weisbrod's hand went away.
No, I'm still here. Just a question for Andy, I guess. Since the deadline for the receipt of questions is this week, just wondered if there were many questions filed or many entities that have submitted questions.
I don't know the answer. Often these things come in at the last minute. I think the intention is to collect all the questions and prepare a single document in response. Beth, I see your hands up. Maybe you know the answer.
Yeah, my understanding from an email from Ben is that, I knew that Larry Simon had responded to a number of questions that have been put forward. When they are all collected, I believe he's going to share them, I assume, with the evaluation team, but possibly, and we can then share them along with the BET.
The process usually is the questions are collected, there are answers provided, but they are provided to all the applicants or all the people that are responding to the RFP, and it's included in the package that the evaluation team eventually gets.
Thanks. Helpful. Thanks.
Mr. Raymer?
Yeah, I had thoughts in two areas. One's process and one's timing. The timing point overlaps somewhat with the remarks that Beth has already made. But on process, first of all, it's not clear to me exactly what is the process, the appropriate process by which one markets for sale a facility like Nathaniel Witherell. But I certainly would have thought that the process would have started, it would have had its genesis at the Nathaniel Witherell board. Was the board on board and, pardon the pun, and supportive of this before the RFP was generated?
They had no part to play in it.
Well,
let me clarify that. Mr. Simon, as chairman of the board, was very much involved from the very beginning with, I believe, with the first selectmen and the town administrator, but the rest of the board did not learn about it until one of the board members apparently got a copy of it and sent it out and asked for clarification from Mr. Simon, who was going to discuss it tonight at the board meeting. And since the board meeting coincides with our meeting, I don't know what he said, but I know that they were having some discussion toward the end of their meeting about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that the BET either is the right source of it, but it did seem unusual to me to hear in the last few days of this RFP in a setting in which we had a working group that had worked over a protracted period of time with this facility, studying options and the like of what to be doing with the property, either to re-enhance its financial performance or determine what sort of a disposition to be made. It just seems remarkable to me that then we went forward making a disposition without even a conversation with that working group. Secondly, since the BET had commissioned this work by Health Dimensions Group and come forward with a series of steps to take to enhance the performance of this facility, it seemed interesting to me that it never came back to the full BET either, that this seemed to be something that went forward with the collaboration of certain members of the BET, but mostly in the office of the first selectman. From a timing standpoint, I try not to be completely repeating something that Ms. Kremick already had said. So the Health Dimensions Group, at considerable expense to us, spent a protracted period of time, made a series of excellent suggestions, which the brand new management, new executive director, new financial officer, new head of nursing in place, and began to institute these changes, and began also to see a remarkable financial result. Yet it's just a budding thing. It's brand new. It hasn't been going very long. And at this moment, we choose to rush in to try and sell it at a moment when its financial history looks, if anything, very disappointing. It seems to me that would be about the worst possible moment at which I would try and market something. If I were to market it at all, I'd rather market it after it had 3 very successful years. Not after it had 3 successful months, which is kind of what you have now. So I'm a little leery of what's happened here. It seems like it's a rush. It seems like it's something that isn't happened on the right timing. I'm a little uncomfortable with the process of who's undertaken to do it and who has not been collaborated with in the process. So I'm a little uncomfortable with what happened here. But nevertheless, since I don't have a role, I guess I'll be just waiting to watch and see.
Mr. Drake, thank you, Mr. Rimmer. Mr. Drake.
Maybe talk about a couple things. The timing of it, and how it arose. As you remember, Jeff, you were on a committee with Beth, me, and Andy, and others. We had a committee for 2 full 2-year cycles. We had 4 years of our committee, but in the most recent BET term, we didn't reconstitute the committee. So that committee completed its mission, it made its report, and it went out of business. Oh, now we're all colleagues and we work together, but that committee that you were on and I was on doesn't exist, and so there was no mechanism for it to act. It didn't exist. The timing, therefore, you might say it's early, you might say it's late. The first 2 years of the committee, as you remember, we came up with some strategic options in the strategic planning committee. And you can find them in our report. We all voted for it. Then we hired a consultant. The consultant ratified the same 4 or 5 strategic options that we should examine. That's all public, and we all voted for that. Then the committee made a summary of the outside consultant's report that we all voted for that had the same 4 or 5 options. What we're doing here is carrying out what the committee and the outside consultants hired by the committee recommended. So we're not selling the enterprise. We're inviting propositions so that everybody can examine these options in a practical sense, moving them from a strictly theoretical ink on paper executive summary of a report into perhaps some real practical alternatives that the committee will weigh and say yes, no, or needs modification, or et cetera. So this, and that's done through purchasing. Purchasing doesn't report to us, our body, as you know well, reports to the first selectman. So that's why purchasing set this out as a request for proposal. We don't have to accept anything, or not we. The town doesn't have to do a deal or not do a deal, or can decline, but this will enable everyone to weigh practical opportunities that follow on all the 4 years of work that you and we all were involved in. So that's what's behind it. And then let me add one little parenthesis as Beth was talking about Larry Simon. Larry Simon, when I talked to him about this, said, it is likely we will get dozens and dozens of propositions. His number was a high number, which I'm not going to repeat, but lots. So we'll see. But the purchasing procedure, all questions must be addressed to Renata Mikulski in purchasing. That's a phrase in the RFP. And she will coordinate all responses, gather all the questions, gather responses, and publish them to all the 60 or 80 people who saw it. And frankly, Mr. Simon, and he probably knows this, is not supposed to be responding. I mean, that is not in keeping with the purchasing policy of our town. He probably knows that. That would enable, by centralizing all the questions in Renata's hands and making one set of answers, it brings some fairness to the process. So, you know, we're here to hear what are the opportunities that are practical to carry out the strategic options that were in the reports that we all worked on and approved.
I see no other hands up. Okay. Continuing on. Old business, none. New business. Tax collector policy recording delinquent property taxes. Heather, or Karen, will you help me with Heather?
She's over.
Good evening, good evening, good evening.
Mute. There we go. Can you hear me, guys?
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and BET members. Tonight, I'm speaking with you about our delinquent real estate taxes. In March, I did a first-time real estate delinquent mailing, which resulted in 2.2 million in collections. This month, I'm currently working on the properties that are at or above the 12-year mark. I've been researching the properties, and several are small parcels that are non-conforming lots. As you know, the BET has created the liaison teams to assist with communications with my office, and I'm all for this. I think it's extremely important that we all work together for the common good of our town. We came together in March of this year to get the 90-day deferment program approved for the residents, and it was a very positive experience. Unfortunately, I want to report that at our last meeting, a comment was made to me that I'll have to answer come November for my actions on these delinquent properties, and that this wasn't political. I just want to say this type of talk to me is very negative and counterproductive. So I'm hoping that this won't happen again. I think that it's real important that we try to get along and be in a positive manner. I'd also like to report that the first installment billing that was due October 1st was 206 million, and we collected 209. We can thank the Greenwich residents for that and focus on the positive outcome despite the pandemic. I'll continue to work towards the resolution on these delinquent properties, and I'll keep you updated as to my progress. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I don't see any hands yet. Let me ask a question, Heather, to you, if I may. I'll get back to the comments later. So, walk us through the process. Somebody doesn't pay their taxes. At some point in time of the year, you put them on notice. Hey, you're late on your taxes, and we're dealing with statutory issues at a 5-year mark, correct, or 15-year mark, or something like that. So I heard you say 12 years. So I guess what you're saying is at the 12-year mark, you start getting really serious, because obviously we want to try not to forfeit any of these taxes.
Correct.
You also said that some of the properties on there, you had questions about their use and ability. What does that mean? You have properties on there that you think they're on the delinquent list, but maybe they should be on the delinquent list? Explain that to me.
Oh, well, I've spoken with the assessor's office, and they've provided me with a lot of information in regard to, there's approximately 7 properties that have not reached the 15, 16-year cutoff. Out of the 7 properties, 5 of them are land properties only. one is commercial, and one is a residential. Of those 5 land, there's only 1 lot that is buildable. The rest of them are small little parcels. One runs along the side of the road that leads into the dump. They're just really strange little parcels that you can't do anything with. One of them is landlocked. One of them is in a backyard that was a different parcel, but that was quit claim to the person that owns the parcel that has the house on it. So it's like a little strip of land that they have a shed on. So they're all just very strange little parcels.
So I guess my question is, I'm sorry, I see some hands up and I will get to it, I promise. What you're saying is there is a process to take those properties and take them off the tax rolls?
Correct.
Wow, we've never heard that before. I've never heard that before. Interesting. I'll come back to my questions later. Mr. Raymer, you have your hand up, followed by Mr. Deuce.
I do. In fairness, Ms. Briglio, the remark you referred to, which was a remark that I made, it wasn't as you set the remark. I said to you, let's get some of this cleaned up so that we don't have to deal with this in next November or next October as a political matter. And if we can deal with these things now, it doesn't have to become a political matter. So I think what you reflected there wasn't perhaps a fair characterization of what I said. I also said it to you, not in a public meeting. I said it to you in a liaison meeting when it would have privacy. You took the privacy away with the comment that you made now. We did ask you at the budget committee if you would kindly do a run of the properties that are more than 10 years delinquent. And you gave that to us under an email from you, which was dated on the 13th, which I think was last Friday. Thank you for that. On that list, I think I count six properties that are 15 or 16 years out. 4 of them are 16 years out. 2 of them are 15 years out. I don't know the precise circumstances. I didn't do the research that you did with the assessor. I note that one of them, with a debt of $62,000 or $63,000, the assessor has an assessed value on it of $222,000. The fact that there's $62,000 owed, that doesn't mean that all of it now is beyond the 15 years. Some of it is 16 years out, some of it is 15 years out. It may be a very small amount of money. I'm not able to determine from the website what's involved, how much the town has lost by the expiration of time. Others of these, the assessor has very small value on it. There's another lot which the assessor shows as being worth only $4,400. We're owed about $1,700. As I understand the process, we can refer these to an outside counsel who pursues it and by statute is paid 15%. The 15% doesn't come out of the town's part. So the enforcement process is without cost to the town. The enforcement process either produces nothing, in which event we get nothing, we paid nothing to have it be enforced, or we collect something, and of whatever's collected, the attorney collects an additional 15%, and again, it doesn't come out of the town's part, the debtor pays for it. There isn't much reason not to do an enforcement. Whatever it is, it is. I mean, there is also a reality that I'd like to be sure that I mentioned out of a fairness to you. I hope you would be as fair with me as I'm being with you. You're new in that job, and not long after you took over the job, COVID came. And I'm sure that was not an easy process with anybody. It doesn't matter that you had spent some time in the tax collector's office previously. You were not the manager of the tax collector's office. There was things to learn, and you didn't have much time before COVID hit. And I think that's all a reasonable thing. My real point for tonight wasn't all of that. My real point for tonight really was the fact that under the charter, section 297, the operations of the tax collector are subject to the policy control of the BET. And if there were things that weren't going just as well as perhaps you'd like them to go, we'd like them to go, maybe it requires that one collaboratively with you set some policy. That's really what my objective was here tonight. And that is that I think we should be asking of your office that you have some systematized way of knowing what's the aging of your accounts and paying attention to the ones that are aging. And I think you reflected here tonight that you, in the last couple of days, have pulled out a list of those that are 12 years or more and are paying attention to that. That's exactly step one of what I was going to ask you to do tonight. Thank you for doing that. Step number two, I think, is that there needs to be a policy of exactly who makes the decision of when we don't pursue the enforcement. Again, I'm not sure why there would ever be a time that we wouldn't be pursuing the enforcement, but you've been reflecting that on some of the counts, you don't think they're eligible for enforcement. Without meaning any offense to the tax collector, I think that's a decision that should be made a little more broadly than just the tax collector alone making that decision.
Absolutely.
And I note that on other things, when we write off accounts as bad debt, for instance, fines from the alarms and this sort of thing, we do it at a BET. We consign that to the audit committee of the BET. I would like to recommend to you that if you're reaching a point where you think there's accounts that need to be enforced, but for one reason or another you think they shouldn't be enforced, we should ignore them and let them go. I think you shouldn't take that decision on yourself. I think it should be brought to the chair and let the chair refer that to the audit committee for their consideration, because I think that's how that needs to be handled. What's missing here is a little bad luck on timing of when COVID came, together with somebody who was new in the job. And I think that resulted in relatively small sums, but some sums of the receivables of the town not being collected. And that's unfortunate. I don't mean that in a critical way, but that's unfortunate. Those things happen. But I think we need to reach the conclusion of encouraging you to set up a system to monitor these accounts, to be open and public about it. And then if there's some that you're choosing not to enforce, then I think that needs to be referred to us. The rest of them should be enforced. And I recognize that during the election process, you expressed a distaste for the enforcement process, but I also like to express, at least on behalf of one BET member, that I have a distaste for not receiving the funds that the town is due from long delinquent taxpayers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Well, I agree. I want to be fiscally responsible towards the town, and anything that's 12 years or older, I'm definitely going to look into, and I will work with whatever office, be it the assessors. I've already spoken with the town's attorney addressing these properties. So it's not that I want to move forward and make these decisions on my own. I look to collaboratively work on it with whoever wants to work on it with me, be it the assessor, be it my BET liaison committee. I'm willing to work with all the departments.
Can I just jump in here too? I just want to remind Mr. Raymer that the last term, the last tax collector had decided to do tax sales, and it was met with pushback from members of the BET, including the chair, because there was an elderly couple that faced being evicted from their property. And, we were tasked with trying to come up with a policy, and we reached a deadlock because there was just no agreement as to what properties would be included in a tax sale and what properties would be excluded. The problem with these tax sales is you have to treat everybody the same. You can't exclude one group in favor of another group if you don't feel that it's being fair. So it's more complicated than what you're letting out to be, as far as what properties get sold, what properties don't get sold. I think one of the parcels, for example, has environmental problems. If the property does not get sold, then the town then owns the problem. So there's a lot of things that go into this. But there was an attempt to come up with a policy, and it was basically stopped dead in its tracks last term. And certainly Heather has tried to at least communicate with us. And I think the first step was, having the liaison meetings with her. And I'm very hopeful going forward that we'll have resolution to this.
Mr. Deuce, followed by Ms. Moriarty.
Okay, I have a question and I have a comment. Comment first. Heather, you mentioned that some of the properties seem to have been unfairly assessed, unfairly taxed. And when you get out to 15 years, you'll have gone to at least 2, possibly 3 revals where the owners could speak up and say something's not quite right in how I'm being assessed. But apparently that was not done. But in any event, I don't think that's your responsibility to worry about that, whether it's been fairly taxed or fairly assessed or not. My question is really to my more learned colleagues. I always had the impression that the 15-year expiry date was beyond which we would not be able to collect any of the accrued taxes. And Jeff, you mentioned, no, really, it's just only what drops off from 15 years previously.
Correct.
You still get the other 14
Yes.
years. So that's very good to hear. So prospectively, when we see schedules of what's delinquent, it'd be nice to have the aging numbers that someone else had requested going forward. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Moriarty,
Randy.
followed by Mr. Raymer's hand is up.
I'm listening to this conversation, and I think there is general agreement that everyone is interested in collecting the taxes that the town is owed and fairly assessing the properties and what should and shouldn't be on the tax rolls, I suppose. But as far as I understand, the BET, while we're given the authority to set policy control, doesn't have any written policies for the tax collector's office. And it sounds like, we've now had a few issues come up from that office in recent terms that it would be appropriate that we maybe spend some time developing a few policies in the area of especially these controversial issues. The issue of how does a property should fall off the tax rolls, is that solely the responsibility of the assessor and she gets input from either the landowner, but maybe the tax collector's office? Are we expecting an aging of receivables report from the tax collector periodically that might show properties that are nearing the 15-year mark? Miss sorry, Heather.
Good day, Heather.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Indicated that you're running reports, starting from 12 years, and that's probably an appropriate mark. I believe Mr. Raymer at a previous meeting said it doesn't take very long to start filing paperwork to ask for collections. But I think we want to lay out the processes and the expectations as it comes to monitoring those properties. When does foreclosure start? What are we expecting for communication with the taxpayer? How do we work with the assessor's office, et cetera? And I'd like to ask Mr. Mason to consider how we may want to address those.
I assure you I will chime in, but Mr. Raymer had his hand up.
I just wanted to dispel the notion that I'm proposing in any way doing something which is unfair, unbalanced. I think it's eminently fair and eminently appropriate for us to establish as a hypothetical that any accounts that are more than 12 years out, we bring an enforcement process. 12 years is a long time to settle your affairs and sell the property or whatever it is necessary for you to meet your financial obligations. Now, some of these debts that are here are substantial. I mean, I don't want to mention names or street addresses, but I've got one property on Ms. Mirgo's list where they owe us $192,000 on a property that the assessor said is worth $1,145,000. But that property likely should be able to sell and generate those kinds of funds, or likely the owner, if they were serious about paying it, likely should be able to reach some conclusion where that debt could be paid. That particular debt is now 11 years out. We have another where $64,600 is due us. That's a fair amount of money. I mentioned one at $62,700 on a property worth $222,000. That's 16 years out. We have another with 20 some odd thousand on a property worth more than 800,000. I mean, these are debts that I think are capable of being paid. It's perfectly reasonable for us to use, if you wish to, for example, and I think it's for the tax collector in the first instance to propose a set of marching orders that she's proposing, but I think it would be perfectly reasonable to say that any debt more than X years out is the debt that we're going to put into an enforcement mode. By the way, a property which has a tax debt, which then is quit claimed to its neighbor, congratulations, the neighbor now has that debt. The fact that it was quit claimed to the adjacent neighbor doesn't mean that the debt isn't paid. It's owed by the property owner. The property owner now is the neighbor who acquired that adjoining piece of property. I mean, I think these things have to do exactly what I proposed, what I intended to propose at the outset of this meeting. And that is, I think the tax collector needs to set a policy, a program of how that she's going to handle enforcement. And in the event that there's a suggestion that there's some that are uncollectible, should not be sent for enforcement for some reason, and I have difficulty seeing what those items are, that should have a second set of eyes besides just the tax collector. I don't mean that in a rude way.
Oh, absolutely, I agree.
Governance. And since we do it with the audit committee of the BET on other kinds of debts, I'm suggesting that that would be a good vehicle, but it's not for me to say. I think that starts in the first instance with our chair. I have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Weisbrod, followed by Ms. Crumick.
Thank you very much. Just a question for Ms. Murillo. We have not met actually, so maybe after the COVID, we'll have a chance to do that. As a matter of just fact, I'm a little confused by the discussion because it's been mentioned here that there are 6 properties that go out beyond the 15 years. And you talked about properties that you were looking at beyond 12 years. I just want to make sure that the facts are right. Is it the case that there are properties for which we have gone beyond the 15-year horizon, and in which case we have relinquished the tax revenues? Is that true or is that not true?
Well, there's 4 properties that are at the 16 years that should have been removed last year on a suspense report that were not removed. So I'm not quite sure why that didn't happen. The 2 that are at 15 years, I'm going to still try to send something out and see if we can get any monies in for those. But the other ones that are at 16 years, we're going to lose that 1 year.
I think, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, may I raise my hand?
Go ahead, Mr. Rimmer.
Sorry. The sheet that the tax collector has given to us has a coding on it with a set of digits that are taken to be the number of years, and the tax collector would have to tell me. But I took that when the tax collector says an item has a 15 next to it, it is already 15 years. When it reaches 15 years, that last year has become uncollectible. So I think the 4 that are at 16 years, correct me, Mr. Meriglio, if I'm wrong, but I think the 4 that are at 16 years, the 2 oldest years plus the interest on them have become uncollectible. The debt plus interest that is younger than 15 years is still collectible. On the 2 others that are exactly at 15 years, those have become uncollectible for the last year, including the interest on that last year. I think that's how that works, but maybe I'm misunderstanding what's meant when the digits 15, 16, 14, et cetera, are written next to it.
I'll have to review those 2 15 years, but I have to see when was the actual last time that they paid, because it all goes by the July 1 date. So it might be that there's a partial installment we can collect on those 2. I'm not positive. I'll have to review it and check into it.
And David, basically it's a rolling date. So if it's 15 years or 16 years in arrears, the first year that taxes were due rolls off, and then if it reaches 17 years, then the second year that taxes were due rolls off, et cetera.
No, when the thing reaches 15 years, it becomes time barred. It doesn't have to wait to become 16. So a debt which is already 15
but what I'm
years old,
saying is it's a rolling number.
Yeah, and to Andy's comment, I hope I did not suggest in any way that when any part of the debt becomes more than 15 years old, the entire debt, including last year's taxes, all become uncollectible. That's not the case. What becomes uncollectible is whatever part of the debt is 15 years or more older, including any interest or lien fees on it.
So you're basically losing 1 year at a time.
Yes,
Correct.
that's correct.
Mr. Weisbrot, I didn't forget you. You were really the speaker. Are you done?
I'm on mute. Yes, and I am done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's where we started with you and then it went over. That brings me to Ms. Crumick.
Mr. Mason, given the discussion this evening, may I make a suggestion that since the chair of the law committee, Ms. Vasiliotis, has done yeoman's work to prepare a policy for the tax collector and tax delinquency, that we be directed as the law committee to go back and complete this work and see if we can put into place policies that would make this a little bit more straightforward going forward.
I would, if I can ask your permission, I will take that into consideration. I need to think this through just for a minute. I don't see any more hands up. Let me see if I can back us up here a minute. Let's back up for a minute. So we've had 2 tax collectors in the past, recent, when discussions about the Office of Tax Collector has come up more than, say, in previous years. Our current tax collector worked for one of them, worked in the town hall during the other one. We sensed issues and lack of dialogue. So this year, the 11 of you permitted me to create to increase the liaisons from the assessor over to the assessor and tax collector in order to create a better working relationship to address things like this. As an example, last term, and I don't want to, the last tax collector was moving on, doing some property sales. And that wasn't well received by some of the peer elected officials in town on both sides of the aisle. And that led into a sort of a starting draft. I think Ms. Vasiliotis was involved with a policy on this kind of thing. Mr. Raymer has questions tonight. I don't have the answers for. I'll have them shortly, but there's a lot of questions that came up that there were no answers. So we started this term with a new tax collector and a new approach to have liaisons, to have this working relationship. We also worked with, and by the way, that recommendation, I want to thank our assessor, because in my conversations, even with the assessor, I said, you know, we've got to make a change here. We've got to make progress. And this was one of the ideas that was there. And of course, we ran with it, and I appreciate everybody's support. But the problem I'm still having is we could fix this. The liaisons need to fix this. But what we can't do, and I don't know what Mr. Raymer's intent of his comment was, and I don't know how it was received. But if I went to Peter Minarski and said, look, you know, if you don't get this straightened out, we're going to have a conversation about your next appointment, he'd probably take my head off. We can't, and I say that because we all do things because we're passionate, but we can't do that. It breaks down relationships. We deal with management in the town, MCs, elected officials. We deal with a lot of people. Some are direct reports to us. And I encourage all of us, you got to have the strength to the goal. I think the liaisons are on the right thing. I think if there was a policy in place that could clear up a lot of this, we wouldn't be here. And I thank those of you who got us here. I'm just asking for, everybody's got to work together here, because this is something that is in need of help. Whether we have the 2 liaisons or our 2 law committee members. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you liaisons. I'm very sorry. But our 2 law committee members, or we have the liaisons do this. We need a policy. It should be the first task for the group on the next meeting. Let's come up with a policy. Let's resurrect. I think Howard was working on a policy. Let's resurrect that, see if that's something we like or don't like, and let's move forward, because we don't have anything. It's not that we have a bad one. We need one, and go from there. And it's going to take everybody's efforts to do this. I mean, I'm appreciative that everybody realizes COVID hit and we had the tax deferment, and how many nights we were all out on explaining that. And I appreciate all that, but we're past that now. At least we think we're past that. And we need to get going on this. So I hope everybody appreciates, from my perspective, how I see this. I mean, we intended starting this term to address this, and I just don't want to see it derailed. Mr. Raymer.
I just want to be sure that I repeat again, since the comments opened with the tax collector saying that I'm getting into issues that I intend to assail her with at the next election, and you've repeated that that's an unfortunate way to approach somebody. Let me be very clear. I made no such remark in public. In a private meeting with her, I said just the opposite to her, as I'm hoping Ms. Mariglio can confirm. I said to her, let's not have this be a political issue next November. Let's address and resolve this problem, figure out now what we're going to do with this problem so that it's all resolved by the time we get to November, and then it's not an issue. And
Well,
I think to be
That's
clear,
not the way I received it, and it made me feel very uncomfortable, Jeff.
no, I did not mean to make you feel uncomfortable. I really meant to try and get to a nice, clear working place with you, that I wanted to resolve the issue, not look for the politics.
Okay.
Your politics, mine was not. Mine was to try and solve the issue. And I think I've been very clear about that.
Okay, so when, can I just ask a question to the liaison? When's our next, let's start pinning this down as a priority for the next meeting. Can I ask that of you, of the four of you?
So reminded by
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes, Mr. Mason. I think this is, we've talked about a lot of details in our meeting today, and we had the key part of the meeting, I think, was productive. And I think it's important we have another one, and we will arrange that tomorrow at a convenient time for the 5 people and get to work on the policy too.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Raymer, I cut you off. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Moving on. The next item, tax policy for residential.
Mike, before you move on, I just wanted to thank Heather for coming to the meeting today. And I know that we'll have more dialogue in the future. So thank you again.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and BUT members.
Thank you. Okay, next item. I'm going to call on the chair of the law committee, but I'm not sure. I know Mr. Raymer's had some involvement on this, so I need to get something before to open the discussion. Ms. Fascilotas?
Actually, if Jeff wants to move the resolutions, I'll put them up on the screen.
No, respectfully, I mean, I'll do whatever the body wants to do, but respectfully, I think the starting place here is for the assessor to lay out what the factual circumstance is that was being suggested. You put up on the screen.
Wrong one, sorry.
You're about to put up on the screen a resolution.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I think before you get to the resolution, I think there ought to be some presentation of what are the facts we're dealing with. The package that went out, the package that was available to the public, does not explain the circumstance. And I think the assessor is here tonight and able to describe exactly what is the point of concern. Then we can talk about what we're going to do about it and what sort of a resolution, if any, is the right solution. Yeah, I hope that's not disagreeable to anybody.
Mr. Raymer, can I just, my plan was to get something in front of us, then to have the assessor, I think, has a presentation, which we're going to share screen, and then we would go to our normal fashion of discussion. I would say in caucus, I said to everybody, how do I want to start this? So I am open for suggestion, but that was my plan.
There's some concerns, Mr. Chairman, about the resolution. And before the conversation devolves into whether it should say this or say that or say nothing at all or have a simple motion in this place, I think it'd be a whole lot better just to talk about the facts, then let's talk about the resolution.
Hang on one second. I would say then that makes some logical sense to me. Can I call on Lauren Elliott, our assessor, for a presentation?
Sure.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We just have to go through 40 pages of Karen's computer.
Okay, yes, get the tech. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I have been asked, and tonight I'm going to present and clarify, hopefully, what we tax, what we exempt, and and have a discussion as to how the town would like to go forward if different, and as to how we deal with the Greenwich private schools.
Now, there's a statute, 1281, that says I am to exempt property that's exclusively used for educational purposes. So that over the course of years, we have been taxing, however, certain faculty housing. Karen, you want to go to the next one? So what we did for each of the private schools, we put together this presentation for you all tonight. And we separated everything out to show you what we tax, what we exempt, and what may or may not be faculty housing that we should probably review and come up with some sort of policy going forward to see how you actually would want to handle some of these other faculty housings that we have. Karen, could you go to the next slide? Okay, so this is Brunswick School. This is what they call the upper school at 100 Mare Avenue. Now, as you can see, oh, back one.
Can you go back one, Karen?
There, okay, stay right there. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and everybody can see this map. As you can see here, this is the Brunswick School. This is 100 Mare Avenue. And I'm just going to show, we've done this for every single school. And you'll see the red dialogue box up there. That's the headmaster's house. Okay, we do not tax the headmaster's house. All the items that are in blue, those are faculty housing that are separate entities. They're on their own separate parcel. There's a single family, so there's a residential land value, and then there's a dwelling value. In Brunswick School, if you look at the sheet that says Brunswick taxable parcels, you'll be able to see, if you look over on the left-hand column, it says parcel ID. And the first one on the list of taxable parcels under parcel ID is 071560. That's the one down in the lower portion of the map. We've been taxing that parcel all along, okay? And if you just follow down 071566, we tax that one as well. We tax that one, and the next one is up 1642. Now, if you look at Brunswick Group 1, these are currently parcels. They are still blue, but we have not been taxing them. And if you look over, you'll see 071633, which is right next to the headmaster's house. It's its own separate parcel. And that's something that we should probably think about whether or not we should, going forward, we should start taxing that parcel.
Can I just ask a point of clarification on the
Sure.
chart? Is it the way to tell what's taxed and what's not taxed is the pieces on the blue parcels are taxed?
So not necessarily.
Okay.
Okay, so if you'll see, how we separated this out was simple. We took all the houses that are on their own separate parcels with their own dwelling. Those are blue, okay? And for the most part, with the exception of a couple here and there, we've been taxing those. Unfortunately, there's a couple here on Brunswick School, under the list that says Brunswick Group 1 that we have not been taxing. Now, if you look, the pink area, where you'll see parcel 07416, that's the campus, okay? So, and those buildings that's what I consider the campuses of the school. They have the academic buildings. You'll see all the academic buildings are the light yellow dialogue boxes. You'll see some that point to nothing, but that's just because the GIS couldn't pick up those, we couldn't pick up all the buildings. The green ones that are on those parcels, you'll notice those are going to be Brunswick Group 2. Those are going to be faculty housing on the main campus, okay? So we made the distinction here of those houses that are quote unquote, or kind of off campus, which are separate entities that are houses that have their own separate lot. Some of them are multifamily, some of them are single families. They're all faculty housing that are not on the campus. So those are what you find under Brunswick Group 1, okay? Brunswick Group 2 is going to consist of the green dialogue boxes on campuses. So those are single family homes or faculty housing on the main campuses of each private school. We do not tax those, okay? But what I was asked to do was to pull out and and basically show you where all the faculty housing is. And I think.
Lauren, for
Yeah, sure.
clarification,
Mhm.
for those houses that do not have, the, for want of a better word, the box around,
The parcel ID, yeah.
okay, are those the ones that we are currently not taxing, and the ones without the box we are taxing?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
actually, if you look, the ones that, if you go look on Brunswick Group 1, that listing that says Brunswick Group 1, and the first one is 07-1633. That's the one that's up there next to the headmaster's house. Okay, we're not taxing that one. If you go and you look at all the next few are all the 07s. Oops, gotta go back. Are the ones that begin with a 07-3. Those are the ones that we are not taxing. 3242, 3243, 3244, 3245. See all those ones that begins with a 3? Those are the ones we are currently not taxing. And if you'll notice, in between some of these parcels, you'll see one that, like for instance, in between 07-3248 and 07-3246, there's 07-1673. We were taxing that one, but we weren't taxing either house on either side of that house. So what we're trying to do is be consistent throughout this whole process. And basically, should we be taxing, the question here is, should we be taxing those parcels that are listed on Group 1? They are kind of within some of those that are already taxable. Okay, whoops, went too far. Okay, does anybody have any questions for me on this map right now? So this is the upper school. This is 100 Mare Avenue. So
let me just insert something here. You made the point quickly, but I'm not sure that it was necessarily grasped by the members of the BET. Also, not sure it was grasped by the public. What's happening here is that you're focusing your attention on buildings, homes, which are used for faculty housing. And the law seems to be that on a day school anyway, a building which is used for faculty housing anyway only is not exempt. Some of these are on independent lots that have their own tax number, a completely separate lot. Others of these are houses that are on a larger campus. And what you've done for each of these schools is you've listed a Group 1, and they're all properties which were formerly not taxed, but you believe they probably should be taxed because they're faculty housing on independent lots. Group 2 is the same thing, except they're not independent lots. They're houses used for faculty housing, but they're on a larger campus. And what's happening here is, in the end, we may discover that our understanding of the facts may be incorrect. So for example, hypothetical, that house that you pointed to next to the headmaster's house, we may discover in the end it's not used for faculty housing. It's used for something else altogether, which is truly an academic purpose, in which event, no, we're incorrect. That should be exempt. It should stay exempt. This is merely a process of approaching something where we have been inconsistent with, on given schools, we've taxed some of these properties and not others. Or as between two different schools, we've taxed these properties of one school, but not the properties of another. There's no intention to be inconsistent. We want to establish a consistent rule in which we gather the facts, and those properties that are being used just for faculty housing at a day school, as we understand the law, it appears that these properties are taxable. And those of them that we've had exempt before, a correction probably needs to be made going forward to make them taxable. There's no intention to reach back and collect back taxes. The question is, what are we doing going forward? And that's the process that you're just beginning here. You haven't yet done the final factual analysis. You're just scratching the surface. Is all of that a fair statement, Lauren?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Carry on. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you for.
I think Miriam Cruiser had a question, Mike.
Sure.
I do. Thank you, Lauren. Just a point of clarification. I know, and I think this was the case for all the schools, that the headmaster house, the head of school house, is considered to be tax exempt regardless of whether it's
Yes.
used as a mixed use for the school. Is that just part of the statute as well, that the head of school's house is tax exempt?
It's not part of the statute, but there's plenty of case law that say that basically the headmaster's house is a functioning of it. They include the headmaster house as a tax exempt portion.
The headmaster's house is tax exempt because basically he's on call 24/7, and he's considered part of the school.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so that's the lower camp, the 100 upper school. Okay, so if you want to go to the next one. Okay, so these are Brunswick School. The map to your left here is the property up on King Street. And here we don't have, on the left-hand side, you'll see on parcel 10, 41, 47, just this parcel, there are no houses that are abutting this parcel. The houses that we do have that are the single family or the faculty housing are the ones that are in green. It's building 8, building 9 through 14, and building 15 through 18. These are also listed on the Brunswick Group 2. Okay, those houses basically, next one. Those are basically faculty housing on the main campus. The majority of the other buildings there, as you know, are academic buildings, and the remaining portion of that property is tax exempt. And actually, everything on that parcel currently is tax exempt. Now, the building across the street is the old Tudor Jones building. It's now the middle school. There we have one, the buildings there on that specific lot on 10, 41, 46. There's no additional faculty housing at this point in time. And then on the next parcel next to it, we have on 10, 10, 40, we have a 12-acre parcel, which I believe, we are currently taxing that parcel. This one that says 10-1040. We are taxing that parcel there. Okay. Does anybody have any question? So basically what we did for every single school, and I'll walk through each school, but every single school we defined what was in group 1, which is single family, as Jeff mentioned, single family dwellings or faculty housings on their own independent lots. And the question is for you folks is, should we, going forward, should we consider these taxable now? In group 2, that's faculty housing that is currently on what I would consider the campus, but it is faculty housing on the campus parcel, so it's on the big parcel. If you go to the next slide.
I'll tell you what, I'm sorry, I'm going to insert there for just one more second. So when you're dealing with a group 1 property where you have a house sitting on its own lot, you have already an assessment of the improvements and an assessment of the land, just like you do on a taxable property. Much more difficult when the house is on a campus. You have an assessment for the value of the improvement. You assess the improvement exactly like you do any other improvement on the house down the street. The difficulty becomes on the land. So you had to include in the valuation a portion of the land. How did you arrive at what portion of the land you are going to assign to this house for that assessment?
So what we did is we took, we used FAR. We took the house square footage, and we determined how much land that in that zone, in that area, how much land they would need and how we would value it. So in other words, what we did is we took each one of these houses and we basically figured out, okay, the minimum lot that would require to actually have that house. And then we valued it as though it was just down the street. So if that house was on its own separate lot somewhere, we figured out what the land value would be. And so then we actually did have a land value and a building value. And what we did is we wanted to make sure that by doing this, we were not taking too much land away from the actual academic building. So there's still a majority of the value belongs with the academic buildings in the fields, and the majority of in some of these parcels, the majority of the value still remains on the exempt portion.
You assign to each building in group 2, each residential building in group 2,
Right. A value, right.
The smallest amount of land that would have just met the FAR, the floor area ratio requirement for that lot in that zone. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Carry on.
Okay. If you want to go to the next slide, Karen. That's okay. Group 2. Those are the remaining. You can see the parcel ID. Okay, these are all the exempt parcels that we have for each. And what I tried to do is I took, for instance, on 100 Mara Avenue, you see in the middle, there's the campus. And if I actually took out the proposed taxable, that means, in other words, the value of those houses plus a value portion to the land value as well, we would tax that, and the exempt value would be $39 million. So in other words, we're looking at this to make sure that we are not taking a big chunk of value out. We're trying to be somewhat conservative as far as the valuation of these properties are concerned. So that's what you'll see on each one when you see an exempt. This is all the exempt properties that Brunswick owns, and then where we have group 2s, you'll see that's what our proposed taxable will be, and we're taking that value off the parcel as a whole. So in other words, on 100 Mara Avenue, currently $45 million is exempt. If we determine that group 2s should be taxed, we're going to take off $6.6 million of that value. So the exempt, they would still get $39 million of exempt value there. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for me?
So Lauren, if I may, so you've done, I mean, we got all the documents. So
yep.
For the people watching, you've done the exact same exercise for all the facilities.
Yes.
So
every single private school. Yep.
It's a consistent look from your part.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we want to move on to Eagle Hill. Okay, go the next one there. Okay, Eagle Hill, this is the 45 Glenwood Road, and you'll see most of the ones that these parcels, they're nowhere near the campus. They are on the taxable list. So there's 4 of those parcels that are on the taxable list that aren't anywhere near, and they've been paying taxes on those for some time. And then, of course, the red there marks the headmaster's house. That's at 20 Glenville Road. Want to go to the next slide? Okay, so this is where the campus is. And we have the same situation here. You'll see the headmaster's house is off to the right. And then wherever you see the green dialog boxes, those are the buildings that are listed in group 2. We have no houses here on what we would consider group 1. We are taxing all the houses that are their own independent lots. We are taxing all of those at the moment. So the question is, should we now look at building 7, building 6, and building 18 through 9? Those are all faculty housing on the Eagle Hill School campus. Okay. Okay. Anybody have any questions on Eagle Hill?
No.
Okay. All right. Greenwich Academy.
You need to move a few pages to the map.
There we go.
One more. Pretty picture. That's
there we go. Okay. So also on Greenwich Academy, we have there's no single entity, there's no single independent parcel here that's not on the main campus that we are not taxing. We are taxing all of them. Okay. So the question then arises, Karen, you want to go to the next one?
No, you've got one there that's a group 2 at the top.
Well, I want to go to the next map.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, next map. Okay. So this is the 200 North Maple campus. And as you can see, there's the headmaster's house, which we're not taxing. There's no group ones. So the only question we would have, there's a group 2. There are 2 parcels, there's two buildings, buildings 8 and building 9 that are faculty housing that are actually quote unquote on this campus. So those would be the 2 buildings that we would want to know whether or not what we should do, what we should be doing going forward. Okay. The rest of the buildings on both of those parcels on the 200 North Maple as well as the 16 Ridgeville Avenue are campus or they're academic buildings. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Greenwich Country Day. This is the property up on 401 Old Church Road. Okay, so we have one parcel here that we have not been taxing that's in group 1, and that's 073251. And it's the one that's right next to the headmaster's house. All the other blue parcels we have been taxing. Okay, those are all on the tax rolls currently. So the only one that is in question here is the one that's 073251, which is the 430 Old Church Road. Okay, now on campus, on both, there's 2 parcels here. There's a main portion of the campus, and you'll see that you have boxes, yes, 9, 6, 13, 12, 6. Those are all faculty housing on one side, and that parcel is 11420. Okay, and then on the other side, you also, excuse me, yes, 11420. 11420. I'm sorry, is on that side. This parcel here is on the other side is 074024. Those houses, there's all faculty housing, as you can see, 1, 6, and then we have 7 through 9. All those buildings there on that side, these are all in group 2, are considered faculty housing. Okay. Now on the Stanwich School campus, which is now part of Greenwich Country Day, at this point in time, there is no faculty housing over there. It's under construction. There is a trailer with offices for the construction, but at this point in time, there is no other faculty housing over on that portion of the campus. Okay.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Sure. When you're defining or saying that the houses are not faculty housing, what is the source of your information? How are you making the determination that they're faculty housing or not faculty housing?
Well, we went out, I sent our commercial appraiser out there for faculty to look and go through the campuses and figure out when we get building permits and what have you. We know our property record cards have notes on them, and we know which ones are supposedly used or have been used for faculty housing and which ones are academic buildings. We know that from walking out there, and we have pictures of them and measuring it. Just that's what part of our property record cards show.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, in any event, of course, there's always the possibility that we're mistaken.
Yep.
So there'll be a process going forward. There needs to be a process going forward for us to be communicating with the schools and indicating to them what our understanding is and give them appropriate opportunity to come and show us that, no, we're incorrect, in which event we'll stand correct.
On occasion, so we've been out there, we go out there every time they pull a building permit. One of our appraisers goes out there and looks and see what new construction, and sometimes they have to pull a permit if they're changing the use of a property or something like that. We go out and we check. I made sure we made a specific effort to go out there and verify most of the campus. We went through it with a fine-tooth comb over the last couple of years to determine what we think is current, what was faculty housing. It may have changed over the last year or so, but what was faculty housing, what buildings are used for educational purposes. So when we have a property record card, we have an actual diagram and a property record card for every single building on all of these private schools. Okay. Okay. Sacred Heart. That's there's just one. There's a headmaster house there. The only building that would be faculty housing on this is building 4. There are no buildings outside this main campus that Sacred Heart owns. So that would be the only one that would be in question. Carmel Academy, as you know, is currently not being used, but there are 2 small dwellings out there, buildings 9 and buildings 10, that have been used in the past for faculty housing.
And there does seem to be case law that would suggest that while you have a campus like that, which is fallow, it continues to carry its tax exempt status. So the fact that they're not operating a school doesn't mean that suddenly now the whole campus leaps onto the tax roll. It doesn't. It might if it suddenly gets a commercial use or residential use or something. But similarly, the 2 buildings on it, which were formerly faculty housing, those 2 will carry their character going forward. And that's why Lauren is having this conversation with you.
Okay, the following schools: Whitby School. There's no additional faculty housing. They're all academic buildings. Oh, I hit the next deck. Same with Greenwich Catholic. There's no additional faculty housing, and same with Putnam Indian Field School. Okay.
I'm aware that that a resolution was offered, and I know that there's been some dialogue about the resolution. I don't know, perhaps, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to address the resolution at this point, or do you think there's questions from others?
Very good question, and I appreciate that. My understanding is there was a resolution that came out of our law committee. However, I think there might be an amendment to that. So I think to move things in the proper order.
No, the statement of policy came out of the liaisons,
Okay, I'm sorry.
not the law. That's a different one.
Okay, so I think that the statement of policy comes from the liaisons. I think in normal fashion, we would want that before us and then open it up for discussion.
Well, I'll move that we open this up. And
Well, I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, so am I correct that the policy that you're talking about is what's before us, correct?
Correct. That's the one that you have on the screen.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question going back to Lauren's presentation. I don't want to
Please.
move in. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I'm just trying to understand the difference between group 1, which are distinct parcels, and group 2. My understanding of valuation is that there's a market component to this. And given that these faculty houses are located on an educational campus, I find it unlikely that those properties would be sold to a third party outside of their educational environment. Is that a correct assumption? I'm just trying to determine, as you look at group 1 versus group 2, I'm having a harder time understanding the valuation for group 2 properties. I mean, we want to incent faculty housing. I think it's a good thing for our town and for the residents who, are consumers of private schools. I wish we had more of it in town. So I just am trying to understand the balance there.
So basically, in order to have a dwelling, you need a land value. So it's not necessarily, we're not necessarily saying that there's a market value that they're actually going to sell this off. What we're saying is that there has to be a value for the land in which the house sits on. Now, you could just say, if you wanted to make a policy, that I suppose you could say that, okay, we're not going to worry about the land. We're just going to tax the dwelling or consider the dwelling, or you may not want to consider anything in group 2. That's for your determination. I'm just trying to come up with what I thought was going to be a fair way in which to value these is as far as a taxable entity. Okay.
Can I be
Sure.
of assistance here?
Sure.
So there are two statutes involved. There's 12-81 subsection 7, which I sent a copy of to everybody, which says that a private school, an educational facility, that means, is entitled to an exemption only for property which is used exclusively for carrying out such educational purposes. And case law has said that housing faculty is not an exclusively educational purpose. Maybe that would lead you astray for have you say then, gee, I guess none of the campus is tax exempt because they've got some faculty housing on it. Well, not so. I gave you also a copy of another section, 12-88, which says, if a portion of the property is being used exclusively for educational purposes and a portion is not, the portion that's not is not tax exempt. The portion that is tax exempt. So now we have to do an apportionment to grant the exemption to the portion that is exclusively used for educational purposes and to deny the exemption to the portion that is faculty housing. How do you apportion the land value on a lot which is otherwise not separated? And it seemed to us that the most generous thing to the taxpayer that you could do is to say, let's assign to that building whatever is the smallest amount of land that would have made it legal from a standpoint of the floor area ratio. We haven't asked it to meet the other zoning requirements of frontage and side yard and backyard and setbacks and maximum height or any other thing. We only said, no, let's just take a look at just the floor area ratio and assign out of the campus a piece of the value of the land value of the campus that equates to just the minimum lot that would have met the floor area requirements for that particular zone, the zone in which that building sits.
Thank you, Jeff. I understood that from Lauren's presentation. Just one more question, if you don't mind. So as I understand it, I'm a little confused by reading some of the maps. Some of the blue parcels are currently on the tax rolls, but we just haven't kept abreast of all of the faculty housing. Is some of this playing catch up, and group 2 taxation would essentially be a change in practice? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Yeah.
If I may, for some odd reason, and I don't know why, but going back in time, and some of this has been taxed and some of it hasn't, and I don't know the rhyme or reason for it. It was done well before I got here, so it's just one of those things that if we were going to be consistent, I think we need to look at. There's a couple of things here before you. If you're going to be consistent, anything that's in group 1. If we're going to treat every private school and all the houses consistently, that's what we should be doing.
Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Further discussion with the screen shared. I can't see hands, so just one at a time. I can't see if you've put your hand up.
Mike, it's Beth. I've put mine up.
Okay.
I just have a question whether this is something that this ought to be considered a first read on a policy and that we come back to it. It is a whole process that we're now signing on to for the tax assessor. And I'm just wondering whether we ought to give it a little bit more time for the BET to consider.
So
I had caused some alarm, Mr. Chairman, by saying to the board incorrectly that I thought that there was some time urgency because the assessor would have to certify the grand list by the 31st of January. In a conversation with the assessor subsequently, I've discovered that there is no such urgency. The assessor has the ability to add properties, she tells me, to the grand list at any time. So there's no reason why this board could not or should not take whatever time it thinks it needs to make a decision that it's comfortable with. It can vote on something tonight, or it cannot. It can spend a month, it can spend a couple of months. I mean, there is some tax value in the interim which is lost, but candidly, a lot of these are properties that we've not been taxing for a decade. So I think the body should, first of all, I apologize that I've given misinformation to the body when I said I thought there was an urgency that this needs to be wrapped up by the 31st of January. Not so. And I think the body should do whatever it is that the body thinks is appropriate by way of timing.
So,
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask the assessor a follow-on question to what?
Ms. Cruiser, I see your hand. I'll be with you, and then right away I see it. So the answer to Ms. Crummick's question is complicated. So let's think about this for a minute. If we were to pass this resolution tonight, Lauren, please help me here. This is interesting. If we were to pass the resolution tonight, you would begin tier 1 and tier 2. You would send out a notice, correct? You would send.
Well, so here's what I think I've discussed with the liaisons, and I think, going forward, this is probably the best way to do it, is I would draft a letter for each specific school. I would say, this is currently what we are taxing. These are what, and I would delineate between what we consider group 1 and group 2. And then I say group 1 is what I think we should be taxing based upon what we're already taxing, and then go on to explain how we got around to the values in group 2, and say that the town is considering, and this is up to going forward, whether or not we should be taxing these. It gives the schools the opportunity to, first of all, go back and say, well, this building's no longer faculty housing, we're using it for offices. So it'll help us go through and make sure that what we have delineated as faculty housing right now is currently used for faculty housing. That's number 1. And number 2 we'll also start a dialogue with the schools in determining, okay, basically what we're trying to do is have them pay or contribute somehow, or contribute a bit more for the housing that they have, and open up a discussion. Now, if we don't make it by the time I sign the ground list in January, we have to be careful here. I don't have to do it by January, but I do have to do it in time. And I'll go back and check the statute, but I believe I have to do it by June if I was going to add them for the July billing, because I have to give them the right to appeal this. If I do put them on the tax rolls and they object to it, they have to go before the Board of Assessment Appeals. There is a provision in the statutes that allows them for us to add supplemental value. So the Board of Assessment Appeals would have to make themselves available for any appeals to them. And then from there, they also have the ability to go to Superior Court. They do have the ability to go right to Superior Court if they wanted to, but it'd probably be best if we give them the ability to go before the Board of Assessment Appeals. So we do want to give them the ability. That's if you want to put them on this grand list. We can wait till the next grand list. This is
so that answers part 1 of the question. That's the process. So until we do something, that process there doesn't begin. Do we agree on just in theory? Now let's talk about the purpose of holding this over for a month. What is the? Nothing has happened, so there's nothing to appeal. There's nothing begun. I'm questioning what would be what is the advantage to anyone for us postponing this, other than it just stops the conversation for today. It's not like I don't see us we're in a position where we're not meeting with the schools. We're not getting feedback. We're not getting out of that. I need to understand what would be the reason to push this back for a month, or I've heard suggested up to 6 months. But that would be my question and answer to Ms. Crummick's question. Ms. Cruiser, your hand was up.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, my questions to Ms. Elliott have to do with the question you just posed. So I guess I have 2 separate questions, but all related to the same theme. I guess my first one is, it sounds like some of these practices, whether wrong or right, are ones that have existed for quite a while. So I guess my first question is, why now? And my second question is, listening to the way that we hope to move, and Mr. Mason's right, a 1 month or 2 month is not going to, my understanding is not going to make much of a difference. Could you kind of walk through from a revenue standpoint to the town, as well as an expense standpoint to the entities in question? You know, when do we expect the funds, and when do they need to find these funds? And the theme I'm getting at is there is something I'm uncomfortable with, at least, with, given that this was something that's happened for a period of time during the time that we're in, and we can't forget that we are in a very difficult time for all of our schools, public or private, that giving them within their fiscal budgets, which end June 30th, schools, you know, run like our budgets, this additional expense kind of at a turn of a dime doesn't sit right with me, given that we can't sit in our blinders that there isn't something going on, you know, around us, which is this pandemic that is affecting the school. So I guess 2 questions, but that's the theme I'm sort of driving at.
You have what I was asked to put this together by my liaisons. You have the option of doing whatever it is you'd like. I can sit here and not do anything this year for the 2020 grand list, and I can still present and start presenting this for them, and then and add it to the grand list of 2021, which means that they wouldn't get a tax bill until July of 2022. If we were to ask them to put on the grand list of 2020, they will then have a taxable obligation starting the fiscal year July 2021. So this basically it's up to you folks as to how you want me to proceed here. It's not been, and I think what we should be doing at some point, we need to make sure that there's some continuity, and that we've treated these faculty housing from one school to the next all the same. We need to do that in fairness to everybody. The question is how and when do you want to do that? And that's for you folks to determine. I'm happy. It doesn't matter either way. If you want to put it out there now and give them until the following grand list, that's an option. I don't have to put them on the tax rolls this year. If you wanted me to put them on the tax rolls this year, I can do that. I don't have to do it by January, but I can certainly do it before July. So it's for you folks to discuss and figure out. Yeah.
So I want to be called by the chairman or whoever he wants to call before I speak. I guess I'm speaking.
I'm sorry, Mr. Weisbrot. I did call you. I was microphoned. I'm sorry.
Okay. So look, it seems to me that the tax assessor is presenting to the BET a map and a set of facts. There's no challenge that I know of that says that these properties, I mean, the way Mr. Raymer, if he's depicting it accurately, has described, these properties are subject to the tax roll. And I'm not sure a motion is needed, a policy statement is needed, or anything. And so what I would see us doing would be to reflect in the minutes of this meeting that our tax assessor brought this matter to our attention, and that she's going to proceed to draft letters to the different schools advising them that this is the process that's going to be followed. It's within the job description of the tax assessor, and it is a reflection of the way the law is written. And then the process just gets started. I don't know that we need to make a motion or act otherwise. It's a question of fact. This is the law. The tax assessor has brought it to our attention. I wasn't aware of this until she did. It was laid out with great thoroughness. The maps were drawn, the maps were presented, and she should perform her duty as she is obligated to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Weisbrot. Ms. Moriarty's next, followed by Mr. Raymer and Ms. Hess.
So interesting. I just sat for the same presentation. I just walked away with different information than Mr. Weisbrot just relayed. What I heard was, there's some properties which we have an inconsistency, the group 1 properties, but the application of the statutes towards the group 2 are still subject to some discussion. And maybe I shouldn't phrase it that way.
That's true.
All right, so that's true. I'll stop there then.
Yeah.
And you've laid out, and the tax assessor has laid out a process for getting more information. At this point, the information of what properties there are and how they're used is based on her department's evaluation and research. The process then entails advising or entering into a notification to those entities of the findings and getting feedback from those findings. So I see this really as a two-step process. One, to acknowledge and to give the assessor the commitment that she should go forward with the next step, which is to write letters identifying the group 1 property separately and the questions about group 2 properties, getting the feedback, and then returning to this board for with her recommendation on how to proceed. I don't see that this resolution is drafted, and I know it hasn't been put in as a motion yet, just says go forward and implement the entire program. And I don't see that I've heard from Ms. Elliott that she's saying there is a decision point to be made based on the information that we get back from the property owners. So I'd like to see us proceed a little bit more slowly, which is to authorize her to move forward, gathering the information, writing the letters, and then come back to the BET with her findings.
Mr. Raymer?
Yeah, so I for one would endorse that completely. I think that puts it very well. To answer Ms. Cruiser's question rather specifically, if every single one of the properties were identified and put onto the tax rolls, no exceptions, and if the apportionment of value is exactly correct, right to the penny, then the tax value of those properties, taxed now for the first time that weren't previously being taxed, would be at about $735,000 a year. It would be paid to the town in 2 installments, half in the coming July, the next half in January. If you postpone it, which seems eminently reasonable, yes, okay, that sum wouldn't be recovered in the first year. If you waited a year to do it, it would be in the next year. But frankly, it's an error in our handling of the taxes that have existed for a long time. It seems perfectly reasonable to let the error persist a little longer while we carefully get it right and handle things thoughtfully and diplomatically with the schools. We've had a lengthy conversation here. I think Ms. Elliott certainly has the point. She'll go forward now and open a dialogue with the schools in which she will indicate the specific properties. She'll express the point of view that we're under the impression that they're faculty housing only and that they're not taxable. Please engage us in a dialogue, and she'll come back to us with her findings. I was wrong about this one. I was right about that one. These are the realities. And here's some fresh maps making the corrections that seem to be appropriate. And then we can decide at that point if we want to say something further to her. But I think the direction here would be that she's going to explore the facts of the schools, get the facts right, and then in due course, it's going to go on to the tax rolls. Will it be by the 31st of January? Possibly, I doubt it. Will it be by the 1st of July? Likely, but perhaps not. Would it be going on in the following year? Maybe. We'll find out what the facts are. She will explore. Let's see how well the dialogue goes. Maybe we can get right down to clear facts right away. Maybe it will be a more difficult process. Whatever it is, it is. This is an eminently fair lady. I've worked with her a lot. I know she's going to do well. I think we could go forward on that informal basis. She's heard this long, tedious meeting. She's ready to go home and get a cup of coffee.
Ms. Hess.
Hi. Thank you, Lauren, for that very helpful presentation. And thank you, Jeff, for your providing some information behind the statute, et cetera. So all very helpful. I see that I don't see any reason to postpone. I think it's been said we're not doing something tomorrow, but we know we have an issue. We know we're inconsistent. I think we need to start the process. We shouldn't wait. And if we decide to do it in two parts and handle the first group differently than the second, well, maybe, but we have situations where we have parcels right next to each other and one is being taxed and the other isn't. And that just doesn't make sense to me. And Jeff, I believe it was you that when we were talking to the tax collector and we were talking about the things that were rolling off, and you talked about the importance of collecting what we're owed. So I'm sorry, that's right. We should be collecting the taxes that we're due. So I'm not saying we're going to go out, but I wouldn't postpone the process. Let's let Lauren do what she does so well, and let's get the information. Maybe we separate into two parts, but I think now that we know there's an issue and an inconsistency, I think we're obligated to address it as a board.
Ms. Tarkington?
Yes, I think there's no question about group one. I think that is the part that's truly inconsistent. I could go on and say why some parts of group two should be also included that group, but I think, moving ahead. I want to clarify though, that if they go on the October 1st grand list, which was said before, but it's the school year or the town's fiscal year of 21-22 when we begin collecting taxes. It isn't, the current year, even though it would be October 1st, it would be moved off. So I think that should, help alleviate some concern that Ms. Cruiser had. But I'd also like to say, one of the things that made this easier or perhaps created a base for conversation for the liaisons is the fact that all of our tax exempts, this goes beyond really the private schools, but this is a large group here, had to complete forms that they send in every 4 years to the tax assessor. And that process was recently completed. So that gave Lauren and her staff in the assessor's office a great base to begin to work with, and a quality of the database that improves their own database. So work has been done, and obviously the tremendous amount of this great presentation behind the scenes and over a period of time. And they're, constantly working. As she said, she's very familiar, and her staff, with these particular campuses due to this other process, in addition to there's so many construction projects that have taken place on all of these campuses over the last, particularly decade. Thank you.
Mr. Drake?
I think we've been talking about this for about an hour. And so let me offer something that I'm listening to all the good comments, and you all can change it or give us your views. I think a lot of good work was done by Lauren. I think Jeff wrote an excellent legal memo, and I agree with what David and Leslie have said. I think what David was in particular saying was, let's go forward. Maybe we do or don't need the resolution, but I think the essence of what David said, and I agree, is this work should go forward. So it's kind of like we're all, the sense, I think a majority sense, what I'm hearing, you can help me interpret, is that this work should go forward, whether we have the resolution or not, it should go forward. Let me ask Lauren a question. Lauren, do you need a resolution to go forward here? And the reason I ask that question is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if you go see the schools in the pandemic, in the middle of their fiscal year, and ask them if they want to pay more taxes, you're going to get a response that we can predict. And so you might need a support of us kind of making a decision, or at least making a policy, or not. For me, if Lauren needs a little support or direction from this 12-person group, then we should give it to her. And if she says she doesn't need it, then I'm with David. Let's do the work. Maybe the resolution is not needed. But I think the consensus of everybody is, let's do it. What do you think, Lauren?
I think group one is easy for me to proceed with myself. Group two is a different story. Case law is very mixed. It's not a clean, easy decision that, yes, this is taxable, no, it's not. It may be litigated. The the cases that are out there, and some of the other municipalities that I've worked in over the years, they've come up with some agreements. They are all very different as to how they handle faculty housing. And some municipalities say faculty housing on the main campus is exempt. Some municipalities say faculty housing that's not on the is taxable. So it hasn't been litigated. It's not going to be a very concise idea here as to how we handle those in group 2. Group 1, I agree with. I think we just have to be consistent. I think that's an easier group to deal with. But even there, we may get the schools may want to appeal those decisions too.
Well, then maybe the sense, others, please speak up. I'm getting a sense from the 12 of us that we'd like to see this go forward. Maybe we don't need the resolution. The resolution is kind of unnecessary as long as we go forward. So shall we go forward?
So I have Mr. Ferrari, Mr. Raymer's hand up, but I haven't chimed in on this. So let me give you a perspective that we need to look at. We've had these conversations through the years about properties. We've had it formally in front of the BET, at least in conversations with the assessor. Our liaisons gave the assessor a task to go out and find the properties in this category that we're not paying taxes, quantify them, give us a list, create a presentation for us to make a policy decision on. Now we don't want to make the policy decision. Now we want to ask the assessor to go do the same work again. I mean, what is she going to do when she goes to one of the schools? She's going to say, this is what I see. What do you think? No, there's a process for that. We've got a legal opinion. We've asked the assessor to do this work. Now the assessor is done exactly what was asked in full detail. Quite frankly, one of the best presentations we've had. And now the question is before us. Do we proceed or did something change? Because I wasn't one of the liaisons that asked for this big project to be done. And it was, and it's a full detailed package before us now. The state laws are what the state laws are. We have to think about consistency. Okay. And I think the way the town should look at this is, I could see the headline now. The people that work for these schools, this is an employee benefit to the schools. We need consistency in the town. Everybody who lives in the town, works in the town, we provide town services for. Police, fire, parks, whatever, we provide services for. And obviously the taxpayers pick up the burden along with some other revenues and fees and what have you. And I think that I can't understand what we're asking Lauren to do. We need to make the policy. She needs to go, if it's tier 1, she needs to say, the finance board of the town of Greenwich has made a policy change. We're doing the following, and here's your process for appeal, which every property owner has. But if that's what we embarked out to do, now all of a sudden we want to hold off and ask the assessor to do the work again or to do another process. I'm lost. I think that we embarked on something, we should do it.
Can I also chime in since I wasn't able to talk and I can't raise my hand? The statement of policy that was circulated to everybody, simply the bottom line is the BET hereby authorizes the assessor to conduct a review of residential structures owned by private schools within the town of Greenwich for the housing of faculty, staff, and their families, and to determine whether the circumstances and facts of such ownership and use allows or disallows said property to be exempt from taxation in accordance with state law. Okay, so Lauren has already done that for the group 1. She's identified properties for the group 2. And then we authorize her to notify those private school property owners determined not to be exempt from real estate taxation of the change of status of said property pursuant to the notification requirements required by state law. So for the group 1, she's going to notify them to say that, look, we've looked at these, we've determined that they're not exempt, that, you're going to have a change of status, and here's the process by which you can either appeal or accept it, etc. For the group 2, she's certainly within her right to go through and say, look, here are properties we've identified. we'd like to have a discussion with you as to whether they are or they aren't faculty, whatever, here's what we think the values are, let's talk. I don't see that this statement of policy prevents her from doing any of that. And I think that, it certainly gives her direction as to what to do. And we are here for policy.
All right, so I think I was next. with
Yes,
my-
yes, Leslie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but everybody else hadn't spoken, so that's why I did that.
Okay, that's okay. Because there's been a lot of comments here. We should proceed with it, okay? I didn't know what it was. Ms. Vasiliotis presented what she defines as it, and this is where I have my concern. First, this has been maybe a subject of discussion amongst the liaisons, but at our public BET member meetings, this has only been mentioned a little bit during assessors' reports of a project they're working on, but none of the facts, none of the information. So this is the first time there is a public airing and a first time that some of us, not as a liaison to the assessor, is looking at the information here and trying to understand the issue. Second, I think the issues and the decisions are different around the group 1 properties versus the group 2 properties. The group 1 seemed very clear cut, and I would agree with those people that have said, let's proceed with it to move forward with it. But group 2, Ms. Elliott has identified some concerns that we head down the path. And the way I read the statement of policy is just go forward and have the process and claim those properties after your evaluation in group 2 of making them non-exempt properties. But there we're entering into a period of potential litigation, which is a cost to the town, consistency among our properties, which could be a problem for us down the road. And I think that particular issue around the group 2 properties should warrant another public discussion at the BET level in deciding how to move forward. So I would propose that we give direction to say move forward with group 1 and move forward on the information gathering from group 2, but come back to the full BET for the full BET's direction on how to proceed there.
Okay, I have next hand I have is Mr. Raymer, followed by Ms. Crumick.
So I would make a motion at this time to continue the matter to the next meeting of the BET. That resolves the question about whether or not we have to horse around with the wording of a resolution. And in the interim, the assessor will go forward. I think she's got some information gathering on group 1 too, by the way, but she's heard all the remarks. In the interim, she can move forward on the information gathering and return to us next month, at which point we'll decide whether at that point we want to do something by way of a formal resolution, but it'll resolve the problem of having to act more formally today. So I'm making a motion to continue to the next month. I'm hoping for.
I second that motion.
A motion to second. Discussion on the motion.
I have a question.
Yes,
So I actually, may I direct it to Lauren? Does that get you what you need though? I mean, that motion, because the way I'm understanding the motion, we're not making a decision on the group 2, right? We all think group 1 makes a lot of sense. It's pretty clear cut. Group 2, you're not doing anything on that until you come back to us. But by passing the motion, I don't believe allows you to do that. So to me, the motion that already exists just still allows you to come back at the next BET meeting and report back to make a decision that we don't need the motion that Mr. Raymer just put forward. I mean, am I reading the motion wrong? Karen?
I guess my question, the question is, Lauren, do you need the extra month to go forward with group 1? Or do you have enough information in group 1? Or can you get the information you need for group 1 to be able to go ahead without delaying it a month?
I can, if I understand the question, I can work on group 1 right away. That's not a problem.
So I would ask Mr. Raymer if he would amend his motion to just consider group 2 properties and allow her to work on the group 1 immediately.
Well, actually, let me interject. If I'm going to go out and I'm going to start dealing with these private schools, it would probably behoove us to put both of the issues out there.
Together in one letter.
Well, here's the thing that usually happens when municipalities do this. We're going to have to open a dialogue with these private schools and figure out how best to, and we may resolve it quite easily or we may not, but we're going to have to create a dialogue with these schools to determine, what do they think is fair and what is not. And we might as well go, if I'm going to add groups 1, we might as well talk about group 2 too. That would make more sense, I think. If I'm going to make an outreach to these private schools and discuss how we deal with faculty housing, let's just put it all out there.
I agree. I'm sorry, but that was what I was trying to get at.
We have a motion. We have a motion on the floor that's seconded. Discussion on that motion. Mr. Raymer, can you highlight to the board what your anticipations are between now and our next meeting? What will transpire to change this conversation that we're having?
My extreme trust in the discretion and wisdom of our tax assessor, who will now start moving forward in a diplomatic and thoughtful way to implement things. I think group 1 is pretty clear, but it certainly is possible that on some house that we've looked at the certificate of occupancy and saw a kitchen and closets and decided it's a residence, and not one person has slept one night in that residence. It gets used for English seminars on Fridays, and we may revise our thinking. I mean, I really don't know, but I do know who my assessor is, and I would invite the assessor to move forward diplomatically to assemble the facts. The facts on group 1 are pretty clear, but her mind is open. The facts on group 2 are somewhat less clear, and she has a bright mind to apply to that too. And we can revisit this all in December. And for the time being, we don't need to do much more than that. I stand on my motion as it is.
So, okay, next to speak on this, I would just say, Mr. Raymer, if I may, the assessor just said her preference would be to start on both of these at the same time. So
yeah.
Speaking to your motion, that would make me not want to support your motion. So Mr. Drake.
Your discretion.
This is one of those cases where you have enough information to decide. The sense of the meeting is everybody wants to act on group 1. I think this is one of those management cases where you have, in the private sector, you have an employee, you're going to send them out to do a task, a good employee. You have to invest in them the authority to execute, to do something. I think we would be best to send Lauren out in a competent way to have these discussions, but she needs the support of a policy statement from this board. It's not just going out to have a conversation. Would you like to pay some more taxes? This is within our responsibility. It is something we should face. That's why everybody did all that good work that we're examining here and discussed this for an hour and a quarter. In order to do this right, we have a responsibility and a duty. We have a duty to our job as PET members and a duty to support Lauren as we send her out to these tasks. We have a duty to express ourselves. And she, if I were her, I'd ask for, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Lauren, but if the shoe was reversed, the shoe on the other foot, and I was working for the board, I'd like the board's authority to kind of know what I'm to do, not just an hour and a quarter of discussions. We're a voting body. Let's vote this resolution. I think it's the right thing to do. It's not premature. She's not going to, nobody's going to pull the trigger on group 2 before the December meeting. But we have a duty to face the things in front of us and decide them after discussing them thoroughly on the basis of some very good work by everybody involved. Let's pass the resolution and therefore put the proper authority in Lauren's hands when she goes out to do the task we're asking her.
Ms. Crumick had her hand up.
Yeah, I was really concerned that the policy, which would now be in the format of a resolution, given the complexity of this and the fact that it's related to state statutes, that we might want to consider ensuring that we've got it right. We've only that's why I was proposing that we consider this a first read and come back in a month and vote on a policy. I want to be very, very careful because I don't know that we've had a policy in this area. We've had statutes we've been following, and certainly Ms. Elliott's predecessor did something because we've got some of these exempt and some not. But it still, to me, feels confused. Not that we don't know what we want to do going forward, but to ensure that the policy is clear. The policy is something that all of us agree on. And I know that the liaisons, as one of them, we certainly have been talking about this a lot, but a lot of you haven't been involved in this. And I'm not sure that Ms. Elliott needs to have a policy in hand in order to continue the process of investigating what are we dealing with. That's my concern. So I would continue to go back to say, let's consider it a first read and come back in a month and give us all time to review it as a policy, not just a resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. Ms. Moriarty's hand was up, and Ms. Erickson hasn't spoken.
I would just say that as for myself, I feel like I have enough information without hesitation to say go forward on group one. The policy doesn't distinguish between group one and group two, but I don't think I have enough information at this point on group two. I heard some mention of case law. There is a statute, but there has been situations where it may or may not be tested. And Mr. Mason, I think you said something about a legal opinion, but I don't, if there is one, I haven't seen it. So I would need more information about group two. Group one, I'm there, but I'm not ready to opine on group two yet. This is all new to me.
Thank you. Ms. Moriarty?
I won't repeat Ms. Erickson's comments. They were very much my own. I think the statement of policy that hasn't yet been moved, but just talks about this as a group. The expectation of passing Mr. Raymer's motion of not voting on that policy tonight and deferring this to next month. Our expectation would be Ms. Elliott would continue on this and come back with whatever additional information she may have next month. And we then may be ready to vote. But I think there are a lot of open questions. I don't think by voting to postpone this, it stops for a month. And I think that we would be better off as a board getting that extra information.
Okay. I see Ms. Hesh, you've already spoken. I see your hand up.
Yes. So what's not clear to me, if we take that path, Miss Elliott would like to go to and have the conversation on both groups at the same time. And is she going to do that if we go forward with the proposal set forth by Mr. Raymer? I don't know that she will. And I'm not saying we need to make a policy now, but I want her to go down the path for both, to have the information so that we then, to Laura's point, have the information to make a more informed decision on the policy. But I don't want her to hold off on having the discussion on both groups. So I think this motion that's being proposed does not give Miss Elliott what she needs to be able to do that.
Let's ask Elliott the question.
Okay.
Already did.
Yeah, I think I can go forward and basically say, and not have a discussion with them that these are group one, these are which houses, and maybe coin it in a different manner to say, okay, which houses here are faculty housing on what, and just go through the whole process with them. And let me think about that, but I can do it either way, I suppose. It's fine. I don't know what, there is no right or wrong here. I don't know what the best path is, but my experience has said, when you start opening the dialogue with the schools, you might as well, go through the whole process with them, as far as go through the properties that are independent on their own independent lots versus the ones that are on the main campus as well.
Would
Mr.
the board
Deuce?
like to vote on Mr. Raymer?
Mr. Deuce, please.
Thank you. it's not clear to me that if we wait a month, do some more research, we'll have greater clarity on on group 2. As others said, though, Bill and Laura, I also feel that on group 1, I am comfortable with proceeding, having Ms. Elliott proceed right now to begin the dialogue with the schools. If I can be certain we have the same sort of level of confidence about group 2 in 30 days, maybe, but to me, that may not be resolved for another year. I don't want to lose the time. I'd rather proceed with group 1, and it's the bigger bird in hand than hope that something might be coming forward for us on group 2.
Okay. Seeing no other hands on Mr. Raymer's motion to postpone. If you excuse me, Ms. Tarkington, I have the floor.
Okay.
If you vote in favor of Mr. Raymer's motion, the implication of that is this item would appear at our next meeting exactly how it is right now. Okay, there would be no change. Okay, if you vote against Mr. Raymer's motion, the dialogue continues where on the item where someone could interject a substitute or a slight amendment to the statement of policy clarifying group 1 and be done with that. I would rather the assessor myself not have to do double work, but the point I'm trying to make is we would definitely clarify that group 1, and then the item could come back to us for the group 2. So if you vote in favor, you're moving this exact dialogue with nothing else to our next meeting. If you vote against, the dialogue continues and we can entertain a motion. Mr. Drake, would you call a roll call vote?
Okay, but voting to postpone, as Mr. Mason has said. Ms. Erickson,
No.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Weisbrod is muted. No.
Mr. Deuce,
No.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
in favor of your own motion. Ms. Pasiotis,
No.
I'm a no. Mr. Mason,
No.
Ms. Tarkington,
No.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Krummick,
Yes.
Ms. Hess,
No.
Ms. Cruiser.
No,
No.
no.
That vote was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 no's. Sorry.
3-9.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask for a little bit of leeway here. Ms. Vassilotis, can you put the statement of policy on the screen for me? The chair would like to make a motion. Please excuse. Paragraph number 4. I'd like to make a modification of 2 words. The BET hereby authorizes the assessor to conduct a review of group 1 residential structures, everything else the same. Do I have a second?
I'll
We're
second
adding
that.
in group 1, a review of between of and residential group 1. Is there a second?
I seconded it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Ray. I really am sorry. Okay. How'd you do that, Karen? That was pretty good. Okay. Does everybody see that? Okay. Can you drop it down now, Karen, so I can see the screen? Because I think there's going to be a dialogue. Okay. We have a motion that's seconded for that 2-word modification. Discussion. Please use your hands.
Mike, just a question. The discussion is for the entire document with that one change. You're not just talking about the last paragraph as the.
Yeah, I'm just inserting 2.
You said if you open up the dialogue and you only do one group, it's going to lead to problems down the road. So if I could, I know we don't amend an amended.
We do not amend.
So at the appropriate time, if we vote on this, I'd like to make an amendment to this because I think that we need to somehow include allowing the dialogue for the group 2 properties.
Okay. I'm sorry to not allow the amendment, but that's a separate discussion. Let's get through Ms. Hess, followed by Ms. Crumick.
I basically wanted to say what Karen said. So I think that we need to have something in here about group 2, and I wouldn't be able to support this without having something in here that gives her the opportunity to also have that discussion. So,
Ms. Crumick?
Okay, one of the problems that I'm saying is we're going to start editing this document, and you haven't defined group 1 versus group 2. There's still work that needs to be done to it, frankly. I think I know Ms. Fasuliotis was working hard to reflect where we were and what we needed, but I wonder if there still should be some discussion.
I just wanted to add,
because you're only referring to group 1, you haven't defined it, you don't have group 2 in there, and we've all been talking about that's the most complicated, and Ms. Elliott has said clearly it makes more sense when she goes out to these schools to talk about both. So I guess I'm confused as to what we would gain at the moment.
Thank you, Ms. Crumick. Ms. Moriarty.
I would think there's a fix we can do here. I can't address Ms. Crumick's comment about whether this is a good policy. I think this is a motion of the BET to say implement what we currently do for these group 1 properties. So it looks like a policy, but I don't see this going in our policy book. So not being the lawyer, I would approve this. I think we would then make a second motion to request the assessor conduct a review of the group 2 structures and not have the second clause about go ahead and implement things. It would just be telling her or asking her formally if we need to do that to conduct that review so she can do those things simultaneously. But I think as a board, we can handle that in 2 separate motions.
If I may, Ms. Moriarty, just to respond to that, the reason that I didn't put anything in here about group 2 is because I think there is a certainly it's going to have to start with the liaisons about group 2. And they're going to have to come back to us with that. There's no doubt about that. I think the message is very clear what our intentions are. Some people can't vote for it if it doesn't have that in it, but I'm just looking at what I'm hearing in the room, and group 1 seemed to not be the question. If a second resolution was my other thought, I want to honor that. Very rarely will you ever see me edit a document on the floor of the BET meeting, but I figured I added 2 words. That's probably enough for this decade, and I don't have to do it for a while.
And I think the problem is the second half of that paragraph, which is only 1 sentence, we don't yet know whether we want to apply that to group 2. So it's not applicable to group 1 and group 2. So the change you made does seem to reflect the conversation we had. Right. I don't think we even need a motion to indicate to the liaisons and the tax assessor to continue to work on group 2, and they can do that simultaneously to be more efficient in the conversations.
Quite frankly, and I don't want to take up other people who have their hands, and I'm being rude and I'm sorry, but quite frankly, that to me, the liaisons, the assessor, and the law committee need to sit down, because it sounds like there's a question of what's challengeable or not. I don't know the answer to that, but the point is, the first part, we don't feel that the challenge is there, and that's why I think we're willing to proceed. So that's just my set. Mr. Raymer, followed by Mr. Weisbrod.
Could you put the document up again, Karen? Karen, can you put the document up again? You're muted. Yeah.
Jeez.
If you take a look at the last paragraph without the yellowed 2 words that are added, and stop at the end of the clause in the first line that says state law. So you have the single sentence that says the BET hereby authorizes the assessor to conduct a review of residential structures owned by private schools within the town of Greenwich for the housing of faculty, staff, and their families, and to determine whether the circumstances and facts of such ownership and use allows or disallows said property to be exempt from taxation in accordance with state law, period. That all by itself is not a bad expression going forward without doing a lot of wordsmithing. And when we've disposed of the current motion, I'd be inclined to move that 1 sentence without the prior 2 paragraphs and without the last clause just that one sentence ending at state law as being an appropriate expression of where this body seems to be. It does not separate groups 1 and 2. It asks the assessor to go out and begin to develop facts. And we at a future meeting can decide whether we want to act on group 1 or group 2 or both or neither or whatever.
I can't, Karen, can you put that down for a minute so I can see who's raising their hand? Mr. Weisbrod is next.
So my original, I mean, the one thing we all agree on in this meeting, which I think is correct, is the confidence we have in our wonderful assessor.
Right.
And so that's why I originally opened this up saying, let's let our assessor do the assessor's job. We don't need a resolution or anything more than to give her the feedback that she's probably gotten by now. I think that by deleting that, to make the suggestion that Mr. Raymer made, really deprives her of the authority that she has, which is to do the job of assessing and determining which properties should be taxed and which shouldn't. That's really not the job of the BET. That's the job of the assessor. That's what she's there for. And we have enormous confidence in her. So, you know, my original preference was no motion is needed. We just give the feedback reflected in the minutes that she should go about doing her job. If people are more comfortable with a written statement to that effect, I'm actually quite happy with the way it's been written by Karen. Having said that, in the interest of time, because the hour is growing late, I would agree to, if the majority were to go along with what Jeff is suggesting, it wouldn't trouble me. But I think the main message is, you know, we have to act on this. It's been brought to our attention. We are deficient. We should be charging taxes where taxes are owed. The assessor has brought it to our attention. Let's get on with it. That's kind of where I am.
And just to piggyback on what David is saying, I agree with him that, you know, Lauren knows her job and knows how to do her job and should be doing her job. What I don't like about the changes that Jeff was suggesting is that it would again delay the group 1, which we know should be on the tax rolls and really is not a problem. Would delay that for another month, which may or may not affect the whole scheme of things. But, you know, why would we want to do that? Why shouldn't she just, you know, make those decisions, have the dialogue on the group 2 and move forward? So, you know, if it doesn't require a resolution and we just tell her to do her job, that's fine with me as well. But I don't know if I can support Jeff's alternate resolution because it doesn't really accomplish what, you know, Lauren has said, that she can go out today or tomorrow and do the group 1. You know, it just is sitting there for a month and it's not going to yield any further information for us.
Mr. Drake?
You know, the key words come after the semicolon. The key words are the BET authorizes. That's what she needs to go forward. So I agree with Mr. Weisbrod. He's perfectly on as usual. But we all have great confidence in Lauren. We should just vote this thing the way it is. I mean, this is one of those cases where Lauren is highly competent. She knows how to deal with group 1 in a different way than group 2 in the same conversation. She already told us she would. So your words are satisfactory there. You've got that part in there that says the BET authorizes the assessor to do her task. She needs that support from us, but she also needs enough liberty of action. You don't have to tell her, Lauren, you have to say this about group 1 and this about group 2, or not talk about group 2. It's just inefficient and it's micromanaging her competence and strategic ability to do her job. This thing is fine. We can trust in Lauren to do it right. We've now authorized it. We've discussed it for an hour and a half. We should vote for it, please. I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Raymer, before I call you, the modification that I've made in second that's before us, I do that because I suspect that same document will be before us shortly, and it will be group 1 will be removed and group 2 will be added. That'll be determining on what the liaisons and the assessors and the law committee figure out as far as the differences between, I actually use the word tier 1 and tier 2, but the properties on the campus versus off the campus. I think that exact same resolution will be before us down the road here as we definitively figure out, if number one, if that's something we want to do, because everybody's decided, I think, that we want to do tier one or group one, whatever the terminology you want to use. I think that decision, there's some comfort in. There's just not decision in the tier two. Okay, that's fine. And I think that could be done as a separate resolution. There's no doubt in my mind, and I don't want to speak for Lauren, but when she shows up to have these conversations and send people notices that you're going to be taxes, I think the dialogue is going to be, look, the BET's not done with this subject right now. They're just done with what they're comfortable with at this point in time and go forward. And I think that's what I thought I heard Ms. Moriarty saying about another resolution, which I don't know if we would need that tonight. We're going to need it, but I don't know if we're going to need it tonight. So I'm sorry for interrupting. Mr. Raymer, you are up.
So I'm tempted to want to add something that provides minimum $600 a week unemployment benefits to all unemployed by COVID. But resisting that for the moment, you've beaten me to death. I now would like to see if Mr. Mason would like to withdraw his motion. I withdraw my second, and we'll put the original resolution. I'm prepared to support it. I'd like just to move on. I think we've done way too much here. So I would.
If I understood that, Mr. Raymer, I might pull my motion, but I didn't understand that.
Oh,
Don't do it, Jeff.
You both need to agree to withdraw the motion to amend.
So it stands as it originally read.
And we just take a vote on that.
Right.
Okay, I'll pull it, Mr. Raymer.
Yeah, and I'll withdraw my second.
Okay. That brings us back to the item before us.
Yes.
Right.
Further discussion.
I can't remember. Was it actually moved?
Hang on, Karen's got to. And this is the item. This is the actual resolution that was in our package, right?
Yes.
Okay. So for the sake of being in proper Robert's rules, can I get a motion to move this resolution? We were amending something that wasn't. That's okay.
Second.
Motion.
Okay, so I heard it moved by Ms. Vassilotis and I heard a couple, 3 seconds. All right, thank you, Karen.
Mrs.
Okay,
Tarkington.
discussion.
I'll
Mrs.
second.
Tarkington.
Who's seconding it?
Ms.
Mrs.
Tarkington seconded it.
Okay,
I know it's getting late, but I so object to this because this is the first time anyone in the public has seen what we're doing here. This is authorizing moving ahead with tier one and tier two, taking the decision out of the BET's hands and giving it to some of our committees, policy, a subset of our members. That's just not how we typically do business. Or
I think the item came to the BT from our liaisons and our committee.
Well, liaisons are on public committees, so
I
nobody
understand
from the
that.
public gets to hear the background or the information, and other members of the BET can attend.
Can I just also state that I think I have confidence in Lauren that she will proceed with the dialogue and that she will come back to the BET with her findings before making any final decisions.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not making any decisions or doing anything. I'm just
Right.
going to go out and verify and do some more fact finding and open up a dialogue with the schools.
Right.
I
That's
don't,
not what this resolution says.
Well,
It says-
it gives her the authorization to do that, but she doesn't have to do it immediately. She can come back to us. And I think that we have confidence enough in our assessor that she will do that. I'm not really concerned that she's going to do something surreptitiously and, all of a sudden we're going to see all these tax.
It's not a matter of confidence, and it's a matter of airing the information to the public before we express a point of view on a specific action. And we're not doing that here. This specifically identifies a direction of action that's not going to come back. We're not within the BET. We're delegating the authority.
But it is her authority to begin with. So I don't think we're delegating any authority. We're just letting her do her job at this point. We can beat this to death, but we have a presentation. We know that, these properties in tier one are probably on the tax rolls are like 99.9%. The other ones, she's gathering more information. She's going to come back and she's going to discuss it with us. Again, her authority is her authority. She could do this without us. It's not something that we're granting that's so, different and so unique. it's something that she's able to do. She's had the dialogue with us, and I just think she just, you know,
Thank you. Ms. Cruiser, last speaker, and I'm going to call for the vote.
Sorry, and thank you for entertaining my point. I am just uncomfortable at the resolution, and I know Ms. Moriarty has noted this already, but I'm just going to say it one last time. I'd feel much more comfortable if we removed the portion of post the semicolon, because it says, and the BET further authorizes the assessor, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're saying Lauren has already said that she's coming back to the BET. She is not going ahead without coming back to us. So it seems like we're putting the cart in front of the horse by putting in that any of that language after that semicolon as part of this resolution. We then, once she comes back, if we want to come up with a resolution on execution and we want to separate group 1 and group 2 and what have you, but I think we're asking, we're stating we're doing something. And again, I know there are a lot of members of the public that are involved here today and so are listening to it, but not all of them. And if this gets into the public hands with that language post semicolon, I think it's going to cause some confusion, and I'd rather it not.
That's a motion to amend, and I would second that motion to amend.
Okay, that's kind of nice, Mr. Raymer, but that was not a motion to amend. I will go back to Ms. Cruiser and let her make that motion
to amend.
Okay.
So I would like, am I still not on mute? I'd like to make a
yes, Mr. Raymer, although he took the floor from you, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. I'll thank you this time. So I'd like make a motion to amend that 4th paragraph, all the language after the semicolon that begins, and the BT further authorizes the assessor to notify those private school property owners, et cetera. Exactly.
Didn't Mr. Raymer already make that motion and we disposed of it?
No, my earlier motion was to excise the first 3 paragraphs as well. What's before us now is the whole text minus the piece that's highlighted in yellow. And that's the first time that's been before us.
Okay. Moved by Ms. Cruiser, seconded by Mr. Raymer. Discussion, but I need the screen, Karen. Okay.
I get back to my, I'm sorry. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but, and I'm sorry that I said dead horse to any horse lovers. But again, this is simply authorizing her to do the research. It's not authorizing her to necessarily contact the schools for the tier 1, which we already agree should be on the tax rolls. I can't support this as it is.
Okay. I would say, I think the BET is just wrestling with language here. I can't see it any other way. First of all, the assessor is getting has her authority, and what we're saying here is that she has to notify people that she is determining if they're to be exempt from real estate, and that comes after a notification. It doesn't mean we're sending them a tax bill tomorrow. It means she's putting them on notice that she's exploring the state statutes to see if they are still able to be tax exempt. It's the BET is saying here that if they do not have to be exempt, that we are going to ask them for property taxes. That's how I understand what we're doing, but it is what it is. Mr. Drake, would you call a roll call vote?
Okay, we're voting on what's on your screen, which is 4 paragraphs that end with the words state law.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to be more pedantic than necessary here, but actually you're first voting for the motion to amend, and then if amended, you're going to vote on the proposition as amended. So you end up taking 2 votes on the same bloody thing, but that is the way you're supposed to do it.
That's correct. So the motion before you, if you vote in the affirmative, you're voting to delete what you see highlighted. If you vote no, then you're voting to leave what's highlighted in.
Okay, so this is a vote to amend, not to pass the amendment.
Correct.
Ms. Cruiser,
Yes.
Ms. Hess,
No.
Ms. Crummy,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington,
No.
Mr. Mason,
No.
I'm a no. Ms. Fasliotis,
No.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
No.
Mr. Weisbrod,
No.
Ms. Erickson.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6, 6.
6, 7.
No. 5,
Nope.
7.
It's 5, 5, 7, it fails.
Okay.
That brings us back to the original motion. Look, I can't suggest to everybody, we had a motion to postpone this. I tried to pick out what I thought we agreed on. We're not making progress on this. And I don't see any change for us. So this is, if we have to bring this resolution to a vote, I mean, we can try that and see where the vote goes. But
Well, your motion, isn't it
Well,
forward though?
we have a motion on the floor to approve this, so we have to take a vote on it.
that's what's before us right now,
Yes.
that document. Further discussion.
No.
Okay.
Okay, one more time. This is, we've gone around in a very long circle and are back to the point of origin. So the motion, which is in your package. Ms. Cruiser.
No.
Pardon me, that was
No.
Ms. Hess,
Yes.
Ms. Crummy,
No.
Ms. Moriarty,
No.
Ms. Tarkington,
Yes.
Mr. Mason.
I'll pass for the moment.
I'm a yes. Ms. Fasliotis,
Yes.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Erickson.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, pending Mr. Mason's vote, there are 7 yeses, 3 nos, and an abstention.
I am a yes.
That vote was 8-3-1.
Thank you.
Passes.
Moving on to our next item.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yes. Thank Lauren.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the COVID resolutions, and I believe they're coming out of our law committee. Am I correct? Ms. Vassilotis?
Yes. The law committee met last week. We considered the resolutions that are in your package, and I'm moving them on behalf of the law committee.
Okay, can you get those resolutions up there for us?
They're up here.
There you go. So before I call for discussion, these are, were these seconded, by the way? Or they're from the law committee anyway?
Committee report doesn't require a second.
Got it. I was just verifying that. So these are for the town. As you know, we've had a lot of departments filing and getting grants from the feds and the state for COVID-related expenses. Some of the departments actually need these resolutions. Their expenditures have been, in excess of their budget, and this will backfill to fill that. So we have 2 resolutions. Just so I'm clear with the hour being late. Are we expecting Ms. Vassilotis, a motion to modify these from what came from the committee?
I'm sorry. Yes, there were just 2 words added, and actually that's what I put up on the screen, to include fiscal year 2021 as the cutoff date for these resolutions, so that they can be considered with the budget resolutions for the following fiscal year during our budget discussions. Now, I understand also that Ms. Moriarty has a potential modification as well, but
Okay, Ms. Vassilotis, do you have a motion to amend what's before us?
I do. I have a motion to amend Let me just highlight the areas, just to add fiscal year 2021 to each of the paragraphs for each of the resolutions. And there are 4 of them, 4 or 5 of them. I don't remember now.
Can I
And
get
I will second Karen's motion.
Thank you, Ms. Tarkington. So we have a motion to amend. Do I need I do have another motion coming that I'm to either replace or amend these. So I guess we have to have a discussion on Karen's amendments, adding to fiscal 2021, or do we want to accept that as?
And again, this is to allow for sunset and to, allow the resolutions to be considered for 2022.
Okay. Okay, so do I need a roll call vote on the amendment?
Will you accept some discussion?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm not sure what it means to say accept reimbursement of fiscal year 21 funds.
Apply for. I'm sorry, it should have been in here. The first one should have been here instead. I'm sorry. In fiscal year 20.
To accept, I'm sorry, to apply for and accept in fiscal year 21.
Right.
Reimbursement.
There you go. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
It got
But
misplaced.
that's it. And we'll have another resolution in the budget if COVID continues for beginning fiscal 22.
Also, Karen, your third one needs to have the fiscal year 21 moved, also about 5 words to the right.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Karen, I don't know why you're saying fiscal 21, because we received some funds in fiscal 20 and we applied for them in fiscal 20.
Okay, again, it was just to be able to sunset it in fiscal 21.
Okay.
So did we accept them in fiscal 2021? I mean, 20?
We did, we got some in fiscal 20. We're getting more in fiscal 21.
Okay, so we can just do 2021 then?
Okay.
No, apply for and accept. Both events have to happen in fiscal year 21 in that sentence structure. You might
I would make the point that you don't need this at all. I mean, if you're referring to specific legislation, so it's not like it's an ongoing grant that's going to happen year after year.
We don't know that.
And we can pass, but it would have a different name. We could pass a different resolution that appears in the budget book that replaces this one, make a statement that
I'm fine with that. I was just trying to address some comments that there needed to be a sunset. And I heard it from both sides of the aisle, so.
I think it was more relevant in the motion that I'm going to make, where I'm not referring to a specific grant.
Okay. So
So I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. So it's a motion as a package. I can't, when you get done, Karen, if you can put it down so I can see whose hands up.
Yes,
I have
I
a
will.
question real quick for Roland. The grants are coming from the feds and the state. And as far as you know, we've accounted for all the ones that are applied for and that we've gotten already.
I think so, but there's, yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Mr. Raymer has his hand up.
No, I'm sorry. You've answered I spoke before.
Oh, okay. I could, when there's a
That'll
shared
occur.
document, I can't see it. Okay. Discussion on the item before us, Ms. Moriarty.
Yes, I wanted to make a motion to amend. I think that may be the cleaner way to do it. To add a sentence to the bottom of each paragraph. Karen, if you have what I sent as a substitute resolution, but I'll now do it as a motion to amend, or I can, if you let me share the screen, I can put it up.
I'll get it up in a second. Hold on.
But basically, the intent here is to cover federal or state legislation that refers to COVID reimbursements, not that will be coming in the next few months potentially, and to just deal with this one time with the RTM, get their authorization to be able to accept the funds. And what this language does, if you look at the first one, it's mirrored in each of the paragraphs, but it said the town's authorized to apply for and accept funds from federal or state under legislation and or regulations enacted in fiscal 21 related to COVID-19 and subsequent acts, and such funds shall become appropriations upon the approval of the BET. So the BET still will have to act to appropriate these funds, but if it's approved by us and approved by the RTM, we don't need to go through the RTM process to approve COVID-related reimbursements. The reason this, I think, is prudent to do now, it is one, that it's timely that there is legislation being discussed, and we hope something occurs. Secondly, it won't be tied up by an RTM meeting deadline and meeting posting deadlines. They don't meet in every single month. It still retains the authority of the BET to approve the appropriation. So if there's something in that grant that we don't want to accept, we don't have to appropriate the funds, and the town is then not obligated. And then thirdly, this one does have a sunset. It is for legislation or regulations enacted in this fiscal year, so that this topic can be considered by the budget committee and the full BET during the regular budget process to see whether we need a new resolution in the budget book. But I think it's prudent, if we're going to go through the process now of debating this and having the RTM debate this, is to cover what we hope to be an eventuality of additional resources.
I second Ms. Moriarty's amendment.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. I think, I'm sorry, Ms. Krubak had her hand up first. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to raise a question. In those amendments where you've put enacted in fiscal 21, we may have the same issue that we had with the original ones, that it might be better not to put that in. They clearly relate to COVID-19. This isn't going to be one hopes, this isn't going to go very much longer beyond next year.
The difference here is that since it's looking forward, the legislation is what is being enacted by fiscal 21. It's not when we apply for grants, and these haven't been done before, so we're not running into the historical timing problem. If we would, under this current resolution, if something were approved in May, the departments could ask for authorization come September, October. It won't limit them from doing that, but it allows us to have a clean slate for new legislation July 1. So it's not the same problem that we had with the other language, but I'm open if people think it's a problem keeping it in there.
Does it prevent us from, is it possible that there's legislation that wouldn't be captured by that because it gets enacted before fiscal 21?
Ms. Erickson had her hand up.
Sorry.
Just
sorry, followed by Ms. S.
Comment and a question. So to me, it makes sense to expand the language to make it broader, to be able to accept any relief monies related to the pandemic. So I like the idea of adding those sentences at the end of each paragraph. Essentially, as I understand it, what we're doing is we're adding an additional budget resolution for fiscal year 21. So when I look at the title of this, it says for receipt of CARES Act funds. I think it's for really any relief funds for COVID. So I don't think it should be limited to CARES, because we've enumerated different grants in the language below. But aren't we just saying this is an additional budget resolution? We're amending the fiscal year 21 budget resolutions for COVID relief funds and just make it simpler?
Well, it's not amending the resolutions, we're adding a new one, but you're right.
But we are amending our existing resolutions by adding one, right?
All of the detail about specific acts that have already happened, typically we don't have that kind of detail in our budget resolutions.
And by the way, this leaves us and goes to the RTM, and the deadline's Friday. We should be finished with this meeting by then, right? Just checking, just checking. Deborah Hess, you're next.
I guess if we are planning to do a resolution in the next budget, don't like what's here now, isn't that sufficient to kind of get us through the rest of this fiscal year? Like, do we even need it? I know that there may be something else that comes up, but we always get like, I don't like being so open-ended because we don't really know what it's going to be. I know it might be painful to have to revisit it, but I feel like we've got it covered based on what's here. We're going to redo it in February anyway. I would say, isn't it better just to leave it as is?
Leave it as Leslie Moriarty has written?
No, as it was proposed to us. Not add that sort of open-ended language for something we don't know. Like, I feel like we're covered.
Well, it's not open-ended that it adopts any grant that comes along. It's very specific for COVID. And we're in a unique situation. I think if there's likely to be something, or we hope there's something in the next 6 months. And so having our budget process start for resolutions effective July 1, there'll be 6 months, hopefully, where we could have tried to apply for funds or become eligible for funds, that we will miss the opportunity. The alternative would be that we'd have to do another resolution at that time and go through the same process. So I think this isn't so open-ended that it's for any grant, for any purpose. It's very limited for a specific purpose.
Mr. Krumik, your hand is up.
Yeah, if you look at this provision, and I'm talking about the additions here at the end in red, they track very carefully other budget resolutions that we have that are intended to cover going forward a similar type of request for funds. So it is limited to COVID-19. I just think that we're trying to shorten the process and make it readily available to our departments.
Mr. Deuce?
I generally am sympathetic here to Ms. Barty's point, but I wonder, are there some grants out there that could be related to COVID that we may not want to accept if they have certain conditions or whatnot that could be not attractive for us to accept the grant?
But the
Point out
BEP
again, it requires the BEP has to approve the appropriation. So in that case, we just wouldn't approve it.
Yeah.
Mr. Weisbrod's hand's up next.
Yeah, I'm just, in the interest of time and the hour, I think Ms. Moriarty's amendment makes all the sense in the world. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty limited. It's limited to the fiscal year ending, 21. I think it's, I would call for a vote.
Ms. Hess, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Andy said. I just am concerned if we don't have the chance, so we catch it at the back end where we don't appropriate, but they appropriate, but then they've already gone through the process of getting the grant based on an open-ended COVID resolution. And I just don't like the potential, there's money out there, but we have to do something in order to get it. That's not something we would want done as a town. So I like the concept. I think I'd rather just spend the time and prove it again, as opposed to what new COVID legislation might come out. And I'm supportive of the concept, but I think there's too many potential unknowns or potential caveats to taking money, and maybe we don't want it.
Before I call for the vote, it brings me back to Nancy Barton, one of our former members her and I were responsible for budget resolutions, and she gave me a good twist on the ear and said, make sure all the resolutions that you know exactly where everything's coming from, you've aired it out, you know where they're coming from. These resolutions are here to be specific and very limited in relieving our authority. She always gave me that stern warning. And I'm fearful for the day that this board has to look at a grant or something coming our way that we might not want to accept. I think we're trying to encourage department heads to be as aggressive as they can to help us out and find these revenues. So before us is a motion by Mrs. Moriarty to amend, seconded. So your vote will be on to vote for the Moriarty motion to amend. If you vote in favor of it, that becomes the item before us. If you vote against it, that does not become, excuse me, the item before us, and the original item returns for a vote. Mr. Drake.
Ms. Cruiser,
Yes.
pardon me?
Yes.
You have such a mild voice, or I have bad ears. That was yes. Ms. Hess,
No.
Ms. Crummey,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
votes for her own motion. Ms. Tarkington,
No.
Mr. Mason,
I'll pass for the moment.
I'm in favor of Ms. Moriarty's amendment. Ms. Fasliotis,
No.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
No.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Erickson.
Yes.
So pending Mr. Mason's vote, that was 7 yeses and 4 noes.
I will abstain on that vote.
So
7.
that passes 7-4-1.
If anybody wants to know the reason I abstained is because I want to thank the work of Ms. Vassilotis and Ms. Moriarty. This came to us and I gave them all the efforts and applause that I could give them to come up with something. And I often get frustrated when we can't agree on something, you know, that's so positive for the town. And on this particular one, there was a language thing. And, you know, I encourage all of our participation, and either way it'll work. But I just wanted to go on record with that. That brings us to our next item, acceptance of the OPEB actuarial report. Mr.
We just voted to the.
Yeah, we
Oh,
have
I'm
to
sorry,
approve
we have
everything
to
as
vote.
amended.
So the amendments before us. Okay, Mr. Drake, call.
As amended.
So now that we've amended the item, we're voting to pass the amendment.
Correct.
One more time, Ms. Cruiser.
Yes.
Got
Is that better?
it. Ms. Hess,
Yes.
Ms. Crummey,
Yes.
Ms. Moriarty,
Yes.
Ms. Tarkington.
Yeah.
That was yes.
Her
Mr.
computer
Mason.
is dying.
Mr. Mason,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Fasliotis,
Yes.
Mr. Raymer,
Yes.
Mr. Deuce,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Weisbrod,
Yes.
Ms. Erickson.
Yes.
That was unanimous.
Just for the record, Ms. Tarkington's battery on her computer is dying, so that's why she sounds weak. Okay, Mr. Drake, I'm sorry, Mr. Deuce, on behalf of the Investment Advisory Committee, the acceptance of the OPEB actuarial report.
Yes, a copy of that report's in your package for tonight. Earlier this past week, the IAC approved 400 to accept the report from our actuary, Greg Stump of Boomershine. It's the annual actuarial evaluation as of July 1st, 2020. And if you go through the report, you can see that the key number in the report is what's now referred to as the actuarially determined employer contribution, the ADEC, which is what we commit to have the town make to the OPEB. And that amount for fiscal 22 is $3,835,422. That's a little bit higher than what we had the last 2 years. This year, you may recall, the contribution is about $3.5 million. The year before, it's about $3.4 million. But it's still below what we contributed back in fiscal 19, which was $4.4 million. So, and we've had the benefit for a couple of years of people transferring to the state health plan. Clearly, that's wearing off. We're again back to paying a little bit higher amounts. The key driver here was the assumed discount rate and reinvestment rate, which was 7%. We've had that for a few years now at the OPEB Trust. And that's in contrast to what's been happening over the last several years with the retirement board and the investments for the defined benefit plan. You may recall that they've taken their rate down to for fiscal 22 down to 6.25. And you may ask, why are we having a higher discount rate for OPEB than we are for our defined benefit plan? And the answer is really several reasons. First, we have a higher expectations for earning a higher yield. And why is that? Again, that has a couple of answers. One, we have no costs. Unlike the advisors helping us with the retirement board, our advisors at the OPEB Trust are professionals, but they work for the town for free, and we benefit by that. Second, just based on the nature of the liability, we can afford to be a little bit less illiquid than perhaps the retirement board, and we tend to have a slightly higher investment in equities, which tend to be a bit more higher yielding. And as a consequence, we've been able to achieve, on average, a slightly higher return on our investment portfolio than what the retirement board's been able to achieve on theirs. And I just, coming in today's meeting, I asked for an update. What have we earned so far this fiscal year? And of course, we've had some help with a very buoyant stock market recently, but the return this year so far for the whole portfolio is 13%. So I'm very pleased by that. So to answer any naysayers, I'm very happy and very confident in having staying with the 7% assumed discount rate and earnings on the portfolio. Compared to the retirement board and the fund for the defined benefit plan, this is still much smaller numbers. You may recall our contribution for fiscal 22 for the retirement board is 28.3 million. So we're still much smaller, but nonetheless, that is what it is. Anyway, so I think tonight I'm happy to answer questions, but I think what we need to do is have the BET approve the receipt of this report, and I guess that's a motion. I guess I need a second for that, and then we'll open up for questions.
That comes from the Investment Advisory Committee, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was yeah. It comes from the committee. Committee accepted it 4-0-0.
Okay, so that won't need a second. Discussion? Yeah. Seeing no hands up. Can I assume that everybody's in favor?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody abstaining or opposed? Okay. I'll show that as 12-0-0 then. Thank you, Mr. Deuce. Thank you very much. That's a pretty good return. Obviously, that's the difference between the investment, right? The difference in the investment limitations between the retirement fund and that.
Well, we have a higher percentage in equities. We can do more. We're allowed to go to 100%. We're not bound by the charter, but we may not get there. We're going to have a more detailed presentation to the BET on this whole topic of OPEB and what we're doing sometime in the first quarter.
Fantastic. Thank you. That brings us to the chair's report. Not much. We're getting back to normal. Ms. Moriarty and
I think Ms. Cruiser had her hand up.
I don't see it.
No, it's okay. My comments on OPEB can be saved for our longer discussion in a future date. Thank you.
Feel free if you want. Your choice.
No, it's fine. We'll have plenty of time to talk about returns and volatility at a future date.
Right. I just didn't see your hand up. So from the chair's perspective, we're trying to get back to normal. We a lot going on, and I want to drag Ms. Moriarty into this. We're getting back to our monthly meeting with First Selectman and Town Administrator. We had a really good meeting this month. We've also met and did an orientation with Shira, who took over and replaced Elaine. I encourage all of you to stop by, say hello. We sat down with our reference handbook, and Peter Minarski and Roland was in and out. We went through a lot of stuff and had a lot of dialogue. It was really good. We flat out gave all the committee members, we told her, make sure that everything's on a timely basis. We're FOI very serious on that, but it was a very good meeting. It was very nice. And I encourage all of you to stop by and introduce yourself and go from there. We have a lot of things coming up. I can tell you that I am getting different phone calls as a BET member this term than ever before. I have some budgetary concerns coming from lots of the nonprofits in town. I'll share that with you from some of the dialogue I've had. The first selectman has got a lot of initiatives, working on the gift policy. He's working on a downtown initiative. We'll see that in the budget. And we're getting ready. I mean, we have one cycle next month with the RTM meeting and us meeting, and then we're past the new year and we really get going. And I appreciate everybody's work and time. And this is still not fun under COVID. So, but hopefully we're making progress. But with that, that takes us to minutes. And our first set of minutes is for October 19th. And I think I have a motion coming to postpone those at the moment. Is that correct, Mr. Drake?
Yes. The latest set did not get into your package.
Okay, so that's October 19th?
That's right.
Okay. So can I get a motion to postpone those till our next meeting?
I'll move to postpone them.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Moriarty. Discussion. I'll just make a quick discussion on that. I want to thank Ms. Moriarty. I mean, our minutes are very in-depth. I mean, they're fantastic, but there's, now we have a transition with Elaine, so we're just catching up, and there's a little bit of a delay on our side, and we'll see if we can modify that. October 29th.
So we're voting to postpone the 19th.
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And then for those of the 29th, I'll move them.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that is it. So before I get a motion to adjournment, even though it's COVID, I will on Thanksgiving be stopping by. I like drumsticks, cheesecake, apple pie. No, I can't do that. There's nothing. There's no COVID restriction on that. How much? No. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It'll be really good.
Thanksgiving, indeed.
Yeah.
I move to adjourn.
And I second that.
Yes, good.
Loud.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.